afternoon. We're going to reconvene the State Board of Education meeting, and we're going to, as we typically do, we're going to accommodate public participation. And Eileen?
Yes.
Welcome. We're just reconvening, and we're going to go right to public participation for our guests who took the time to be here today. And then we'll get back to some of the other agenda items.
I currently have two forms for public participation. Anne Marie Borders, who will be first, and Nicholas Seglarek. Did I say it right? Yay! Okay, so Anne Marie Borders, if you would come to the end of the table. And while you're coming, I will let you know that public participation, you'll have 5 minutes, and the board does not engage in conversation. Thanks. During that time, but they're happy to hear whatever it is you have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll start the clock when you're ready. Oh, yep.
There's a reason they made text. That one. But I'll tell them you're still having trouble.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Flanagan, members of the State Board of Education, and guests. My name is Anne Marie Borders. I live at 1200 Ardmore in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'm very honored to be here today. Thank you so much. I taught kindergarten and first grade for 20 years before returning to the music department 2 years ago as an elementary music and humanities teacher. I'm a National Board certified teacher and a member of the Network of Michigan Educators, here today to share success stories with you. I'm not nervous. From my classroom and my school. I teach at Carpenter Elementary, a Title I school in Ann Arbor. We're one of the largest schools of choice in our area, drawing students from Ypsilanti and neighboring districts. Consequently, many of our 400 students have wide-ranging skills in literacy, core academics, and English proficiency. Our staff works together every day to try and achieve the objectives that we know our students need. By integrating the arts and using a cultural theme into the academic curricula, we try to address the varied needs of our students. This school year, with funding from the University of Michigan NAM Center's Single Shard Grant and the Ann Arbor Education Foundation Grant, my art colleague Karen McDonald and I spent 3 months teaching integrated arts and core content lessons on Korean culture. The NAM Center provided a copy of the chapter book, A Single Shard, for each 4th grade student. It's a middle school book with challenging vocabulary. To help introduce the 12th century lifestyle, vocabulary, and events, I spent time at the end of each class reading the story aloud and discussing the vocabulary and new ideas. It's a story of a homeless orphan child who dreams of one day becoming a potter. It's filled with a variety of thought-provoking situations where the main character learns about truth, honesty, hard work, and honor. We illustrated pictures, answered questions at the end of each chapter, reviewing spelling, punctuation, and penmanship. The book helped us prepare for our visit to the University of Michigan's Museum of Art for a docent-led tour of Korean Celadon pottery and an artist-led tile clay class. In the art classroom at Carpenter, students made watercolor fans, theater masks, designed and decorated their own clay coil pots. In the music room, we learned that you can find almost anything, music, story, lessons, foreign language on YouTube. We watched traditional dances, drumming parades, language lessons, stories, songs, all while learning the recorder. The Shinoboro Korean drummers performed in a music assembly using traditional drums and notation, and our grant helped us purchase 2 jangu drums, a stand, and gong. Students have been using them to imitate rhythmic patterns in class. Community members, parents, a staff spouse, and college students help students learn to write simple Hangul characters and copy their names in Korean. We invited students and instructors from the local Taekwondo Academy to perform for us. Some students and teachers were able to participate on stage. While 4th grade students were focusing on a single Korean story and activity, Second grade students were also listening, reading, writing, coloring flags, learning and comparing water and landforms, searching for geometric shapes in architecture, observing the life cycle of a silkworm, and trying on traditional clothing. 3 months after we started our project, everything was put on display in a temporary Korean museum in our multipurpose room. It was open to the entire school community for the afternoon. Parents and families came to celebrate the hard work done by our students in the evening, where they watched our short musical concert, including recorder, shared a potluck meal, and watched a second taekwondo demonstration. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Did we engage students? We did. Did we reach our full range of learners? Yes. Some students who couldn't read, and we're talking about fourth graders, when they started the year and were terrified to pick up a pencil because they knew other students were watching and they didn't want to be found out. Started by doing illustrations, copying group-generated sentences, and eventually helped complete the academics. And these same children were initially the most behaviorally challenged prior to these activities. Simple accomplishments led to increased awareness, perseverance, determination. Students' fine motor skills, confidence, and comprehension increased. They stayed on task for longer periods of time. Were there opportunities to collaborate? Yes. Students worked together while writing story summaries and completing hands-on art projects. They complemented each other's work, made positive comments and suggestions. Is that my time? Okay. How do we integrate academics and the arts with our overarching theme? We wrote, illustrated, read, observed, created, discussed, listened to, imitated, and completed stories, songs, movements, skills needed to accomplish 21st century learners. 2 things surprised me. Students were so excited about learning in the written Hangul language, they independently went on Google and wrote notes to me in Korean, which I then had to translate. Secondly, I was amazed at the amount of compassion these children showed toward the main story character, because some of them know what it's like to be cold, hungry, and helpless. And yet they, like the story's character, persevered. They know we expect them to succeed, and they did. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Thanks so much for your service and dedication to our kids.
Thank you for the extra time.
The next speaker, and I believe the last speaker, is Nick Seglarek.
Thank you.
And you may be being very kind with the way I pronounce your name. Feel free to correct me.
Thank you. Thank you for the time. My name is Nick Seglarek, so you did a great job. I'm honored to serve the students and staff and families of Hudsonville Schools. Hudsonville Schools is a district of about 6,500 students located about 10 minutes outside of Grand Rapids. It's a growing community. Over the last 21 years, we've seen positive enrollment growth going from a district of about 3,500 students to now 6,500 students. The reason for my visit here really is one of recognition for Superintendent Flanagan. Understanding the roles and responsibilities of a superintendent, I wanted to take the time on behalf of Hudsonville Schools, the Board of Education, to recognize Superintendent Flanagan for his service to the students, not just in Hudsonville, but in the state of Michigan. I understand that it can be incredibly challenging at times, and I also recognize that Mike has done it with poise and with a heart for children. So, a small token of our appreciation, I'd like to just present him with a plaque that says the following: outstanding leadership presented to Mike Flanagan, State Superintendent, for providing guidance and inspiring excellence. Thank you for leading with honor, integrity, and commitment. Hudsonville Public Schools Board of Education, May 2015.
Thanks so much, Nick. I was worried about what you were suddenly on. Normally, if a superintendent comes, it's not good news.
Well, on a personal note, he also took a 29-year-old young superintendent under his wing in a former position, and that's something I'll never forget. So I appreciate that.
You've had 2 successful superintendencies, and you know, one thing that's really inspiring is Nick maybe still to this day, but at that time, was the only mother-son superintendency in the country. It's quite an inspiration to watch you follow your mom and both of you being so
She's
successful.
my hero and mentor, so she's now since retired, but thank you for mentioning that.
Get a picture. Back to the,
And I believe there are no other public participation forms. Am I correct about that? So that concludes public participation. Thank you.
Well, why don't we jump to new MDE employees? Does that make sense? And you're certainly welcome to still stay for the rest of the exciting day, and it will be, I think, yet. But why don't we do that in case some have to return? So Kyle, I think you're starting this off.
it's my pleasure to introduce Kevin Walters, who's joined us since our last meeting in the Office of School Support Services. Tell me a little about what you do here.
Thanks, Kyle. Kevin Walters, the new supervisor of Grants Coordination School Support Unit. We handle the state and federal grants and also the electronic management reporting systems in the departments.
Kevin, you come from, I know, so it's a rhetorical question.
From where? Up here. Far, far away.
But I mean, your recent work.
Recent work, I was a superintendent in Southwest Michigan after 25 years of K-12 side.
Okay, and then going on from there.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to present Jim Whitaker, who is joining us from the CTE office. And you want to share a little bit about what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm the Technical Review Assistance Compliance Coordinator for the Office of Career and Technical Education. I came to MDE from the Workforce Development Agency, and where I worked on the federal GARP grant and as an evaluation liaison.
Welcome, Jim.
And then we have Krista Abdul Hamid from the Office of Field Services.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Krista Abdul Hamid. I work with the Office of Field Services Special Populations Unit. I am the administrative assistant to Dr. Shireen Tabrizi, and I help with the basic operations of the office to make sure everything is moving smoothly. And I'm from actually Netflix customer service trainer, so that was my previous position.
Can you get us a deal?
So if we have questions.
Yeah. When that thing keeps us spinning and won't.
It's not the computer.
Next is Jerry Cullum from the Office of Special Education.
I'm Jerry, and I'm a new education research consultant in the Office of Special Education. I'm working in the performance reporting unit, so that involves some monitoring of data from intermediate school districts and local districts, and then also helping to look at practices and try to predict things that will lead to better outcomes, both in the short term and long term for students with special needs.
Thank you.
And then finally, Jan Weckstein, who is also from the Office of Special Education.
Hello, I'm Jan Weckstein. I came most recently, retired after 30 years in public education, most recently as Assistant Superintendent for Special Ed with the Clark Gladwin RESD. And I'm working in the Office of Special Education Program Accountability Unit as a state complaints consultant now. Investigating a few complaints along the way, but the major responsibility in my position is to monitor, work with staff, program accountability staff, the unit, and intermediate school districts and local districts to monitor the effectiveness and implementation and timeliness of our state complaint system. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Welcome. Welcome the whole team. Thank you for joining us. Now we'll get right back on the track with our agenda. This is a presentation on the plan to ensure equitable access to excellent educators. We kind of had a preview of that indirectly today because of some other comments and questions from the board. So I think it turned out to be pretty timely. And Vanessa and Abby are going to join us at the table. Vanessa will tell you, and she certainly had a hand in this, but this has been led primarily by Abby and just done a sensational job. I tweeted yesterday from Ed Alliance where Abby, tougher crowd than this crowd in some ways, but I thought did a really really excellent job with the Education Alliance yesterday in presenting this material also.
Thank you, Mike. So, like Mike said, this is a plan that Abby's been leading the effort to pull it together. I wanted to take a minute and call out the people who worked on the plan or are working on the plan. We really have focused a lot at the department on cross-office collaboration, integrated efforts. So, Mark Idrum and Tammy Hatfield, Sarah Kate Levan, Sean Kotke, Jared Robinson, Paula Daniels, Erica Bolig, Dan Ledoux, Linda Forward, Leah Breen, Patty Cantu, Mike Radke, Jen Huskin-LaPointe, Jeff Dietrich, Kelly Flaminio, and actually Sally Vaughn, our former deputy superintendent, is back helping us with this plan, which has been great. So it's
I was wondering what the heck she was doing in the building the other day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Told her you were done.
Well, she's
Didn't happen.
just likes it so much she can't stay away. So she probably listens. Hi, Sally. So thanks to the team that's worked on this and for Abby for leading the effort.
So I've been here certainly earlier this year to talk to you about various requirements of the ESEA that the federal government, the United States Department of Education, has offered to let states waive. Today I'm going to talk about a requirement contained in ESEA as reauthorized as No Child Left Behind, a requirement that they're sticking to and actually kind of resurfacing after a time. So I have up here the citation and the language from whence this requirement comes. And it asks that states include as part of their overall state plans that they describe steps that the state education agency will take to ensure that poor and minority children are not taught at higher rates than other children by inexperienced, unqualified, or out-of-field teachers. They last requested that states update these plans in 2006, so it's been a bit of a gap in time since states have taken a real look at this. And in 2006, just as the focus on teacher quality through No Child Left Behind was on highly qualified status, so too was the 2006 plan. And the requirements, as you'll see throughout here, have shifted to a great degree, as many other initiatives out of the current administration have indicated, to a focus on from inputs or the qualification status to outputs and the things that teachers do in classrooms, including the effect that they have on student outcomes. We'll see in looking at key definitions, which are one of the plan requirements up here, that we're currently kind of stuck somewhere in between those two places, the inputs and the outputs. And while we can pretty much universally agree that we all want effective or excellent educators in front of our students, figuring out how to define and measure that is quite a bit trickier and goes really a lot deeper than getting to a label. And it's all about how we recruit, train, support, and retain our most important resource in the education system. So looking at first the required definitions as part of this plan, and I'll make a note here that we do stick to these definitions to maintain clarity and ensure consistency with the actual statutory language. There are 5 required definitions in the plan. Inexperienced teacher, which Michigan defines as a teacher holding initial certification, roughly a teacher within the first 3 years of being in the classroom. Unqualified teacher is a teacher not authorized to teach in a current setting. So for example, if a teacher is authorized to teach general education classes and they are teaching in a special education environment, they would be considered unqualified by this definition. Out-of-field teacher is a teacher not authorized to teach in a current assigned content area or grade level. So if a teacher is, for example, certified to teach secondary social studies and has been assigned to a science classroom, they would be considered out of field by this definition. And then the definitions for poor student and minority student are consistent with the definitions that we use in the various other federal reporting requirements that we use as a state. The requirements of the plan also offer states the opportunity to supply some optional or additional definitions. And here we decided as a state that we wanted to take a look at not just gaps for poor and minority students, but what gaps we see for access for students with disabilities and students with limited English proficiency. And again, those definitions are up here, again, consistent with other programming that we do. I also note up here that USED strongly encourages, and many states are providing a definition for effective or excellent, as the name of the plan implies. Michigan's lack of a statewide evaluation system right now is currently a bit of a roadblock for us to have a consistent statewide definition across districts. But when we talk about strategies later, we will talk, and I'll discuss kind of a mechanism that we are proposing to put in place that will help us work towards a common definition of effective or excellent, with or without that statewide evaluation system. Another requirement of the plan, of course, is to identify the gaps that we have in Michigan. And this was left pretty open to states to take a look at the best data that they have available and determine how they analyze it to get to where these gaps exist. And so we asked the question, where are the gaps in access to excellent educators? Where are they observable for poor students, minority students, students with disabilities, and students with limited English proficiency? And again, we are looking at inexperience or experience, out-of-field or in-field status, and qualification as proxy variables for the excellent label, the excellent educators. The analysis focus here at the school level. We divided schools into quartiles based on the percentage of each of these various student groups. So, for example, looking at minority students, we divided all of the schools in Michigan into quartiles, the top quartile having the schools with the highest percentage of minority students, the lowest quartile being the schools that had the lowest percentage of minority students in them. These quartiles were then analyzed and compared based on the composition of the teaching staff, again, using these proxy variables. When we went into it, our hypothesis was that we'd see observable gaps in excellent educators, that we would find them in schools with large populations of minority students, poor students, students with disabilities, and students with limited English proficiency. What we found was that the overall percentage of both unqualified and out-of-field teachers was small, and there was little variability across the various quartiles of schools. So we then focused a little bit closer on the experience piece. And what we found is that our hypothesis was both proved and disproved, surprisingly. There were significant gaps in access to experienced teachers in our schools with large populations of minority students and poor students. But those gaps were not observable in our schools in the top quartile of populations of students with disabilities and students with limited English proficiency. So I'll make a note that while we move forward with the plan, because the hypothesis, again, was interestingly both proved in part and disproved in part, that we continue throughout the plan as we are building it to talk about the gaps that are observable. But we are also very deliberately building in a process to take a closer look at that part of the hypothesis that was disproved, because we know and we hear anecdotally, and there is such a volume of research and data that these students are not equitably served, that we need to do some additional digging, and we need to do some initial analysis to figure out what's going on and why this particular way of looking at the data did not reflect what we assumed to be true.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? What does the linear line mean?
I'm sorry?
What is this?
Yes, I'm sorry. On what you see here on this chart, each of the bars represents the percentage of teachers that we consider inexperienced. So those are the teachers within the first 3 years in the classroom. And you see here,
It's over, it's over a quarter even statewide.
you can see here just a comparison across, and we're going to take a little bit closer look again at kind of the parts that were reinforced and that were surprising to us. So we saw that, again, the gaps were not observable for the schools that had high percentages of student populations that had students with disabilities and high limited English proficiency, and those gaps were inverted, essentially, from what we assumed would be true. In that, for example, our schools with a high population of students with disabilities actually had about the state average and certainly better access to experienced teachers than those with low population. So not surprisingly, we observed significant gaps in the percentage of experienced teachers in high poverty and high minority schools, both against the state average here, like Mike said, about just over a quarter of teachers statewide, and against the low poverty and the low minority schools. So based on the findings here, we wanted to take a little bit closer look from the overall teaching force by quartile to how these teachers are actually deployed in the schools. So kind of another layer down in terms of this gap that we did observe. And in looking at how teachers are concentrated in these schools, what we see here on this graph is that the gap is amplified in both high poverty and high minority schools on the next slide. What this shows is that 17.9% of our high poverty schools have teaching staffs that are comprised 50 to 75% inexperienced teachers. Almost 16% of those schools are served by a teaching staff that is 75 to 100% inexperienced, compared to what we see here, the numbers for low poverty schools. Similarly, for our schools that have high populations of minority students, 19% of those schools have teaching staffs that are 50 to 75% inexperienced, and over 22%, the teaching staff is 75 to 100% inexperienced. Now, this is even more striking, I think. I'll take a step back here and say, because I didn't earlier, that in using these proxy variables, right, we know, and I certainly, when I was in the classroom in my first 3 years, would have chafed had somebody told me that there was no possible way I could be considered excellent or effective. We know that they are not on equal footing, but there is an established enough base of research that teachers develop or improve in effectiveness over the first 3 to 5 years that we feel comfortable using that as a proxy. Similarly here, what we see is that this significantly increases a student's chance of having an inexperienced teacher year over year. And what the research tells us here is that having an inexperienced or an ineffective teacher for 1 year is not good, but it's not detrimental to a student's long-term career in the classroom. But when we have students in classrooms with ineffective teachers year over year, that has a significant detrimental effect on their overall outcomes over the course of their K-12 career.
Just a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Would Teach for America students be included in this? Are they certified?
They are.
So that would be part of this count then?
It would be, yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So talking a little bit about the process and how we've approached stakeholder engagement, which has been a little bit different than some of our other state plans. In April, we embarked on a 1.5-day, very full agenda, very full days, structured dialogue process with over 30 participants, including Pamela, representing over 70 stakeholder perspectives, which included state and local boards of education, educator preparation institutions, parents, students, teachers, principals, and so forth, representing all of the geographic areas of the state as well. What we took a look at is how do we develop a root cause analysis? We observe the gap now. What do we think is contributing to these gaps that we've observed? And so we asked the question, what are the barriers within the educational system that contribute to inequitable access to excellent educators for students who are minority and or high poverty? And that group discussed and generated recommendations for strategies to address the root causes that were identified. I'm going to go through now where our draft plan is right now, keeping in mind that this is a draft plan at this point in the process, and we're still very much in the process of collecting stakeholder feedback and input as to what we ultimately submit. But that 1.5-day experience and structured dialogue with our stakeholders really heavily informed what I'm going to talk through here, including the development of our theory of action going forward. Is that if we build an infrastructure that includes representative stakeholder perspectives to identify and examine specific gaps in access to excellent educators, use data to prioritize strategies to close identified gaps, focus resources on effective strategies, and pilot and measure new strategies, then we will achieve equitable access to excellent educators for all students in Michigan. So breaking that down a little bit, it's essentially kind of a three-pronged approach. The first one being that we take a look and we build infrastructure and capacity to support this work. The strongest root causes, or root causes that came up and were reinforced over and over throughout that day and a half, focused on the systems, its capacity, and various resource matching mechanisms in our education system. And so the strategies that we are proposing based on that is, first of all, formalizing a standing equitable access advisory group to help us and really charging them with the providing a vision and leadership for how we work together to ensure excellent educators in every classroom, building, and district in the state of Michigan. Focusing on capacity issues throughout the system and identifying and prioritizing short and long-term strategy implementation and review. Directly related to that and certainly informed by that group is establishing and implementing a robust agenda for data analysis to guide actions. So as much as the data that we looked at informed this plan and informed the direction, it also raised a lot more questions that we know we need to take a look at, including what I mentioned earlier with the sort of the inverse gap that we observed for students with disabilities and students with limited English proficiency. But additionally, taking a look at inequitable distribution and gaps that may exist for school and district leaders. Our plan right now focuses just on classroom teachers. Examining regional and within school gaps, so taking a look at schools and saying which teachers are deployed to work with which students, not across schools, but within schools. Looking at a prediction tool to help us anticipate where we might see future gaps in equitable access or future shortage areas. And then evaluation and reporting on the strategies that we implement to close the equity gaps. The second piece is to take a look and measure and support strategies that we currently have in place or are currently getting off the ground. And these are related to additional root causes that were identified by the group that address recruitment, preparation, and support for teachers specifically working in high-need schools. We will look to focus resources to measure and support strategies, including the implementation of the Michigan Teacher Corps. And Melody, this gets at, I think, the issues that you raised this morning in terms of recruiting, specialized support, and smart retention of teachers, specifically to the Michigan Teacher Corps in 5 schools in Detroit starting this fall. So that initiative just getting off the ground. Implementing teacher loan forgiveness awareness. Of course, the federal government offers loan forgiveness programs for teachers who teach in high-need schools. But what we see in Michigan is kind of a low participation rate. So we are involved in a project to increase awareness of that and see if increased awareness results in increased utilization, and thereby increased utilization leads to higher retention in these schools. And then a focus on building internal MDE capacity. We are looking at a new focus on the educator talent pipeline rather than distinct activities within that. And as Vanessa mentioned, the coordination and implementation management of large cross-office projects, including this one. And finally, taking a look at piloting new strategies. There was a very strong call, a very strong desire in our stakeholder meeting and in various other meetings and conversations outside of that, that we need a call to action. We need some sort of campaign to change the conversation around teachers and teacher quality that will help us attract new talent and support and retain existing talent. And to really recognize the contributions of like I mentioned earlier, the most important resource that we have to serve kids in our schools. And the final strategy that we're looking at is exploring the establishment of a statewide educator jobs database. The idea came up that if we had a mechanism by which those who are looking for teachers could access the full talent pool, and those in the talent pool could in turn access all of the hiring agencies, then we'd open up new pathways and new avenues to get teachers into the places where they're needed through a mechanism that may not currently be in existence.
If I may just say, this is something that we think, in working on it for a while, even before the actual advisory committee, but things like the Michigan Teacher Corps, which will have 5 schools, MDE program, 5 schools that will have a pipeline there this coming fall, that everything else in some ways is important, but not as important. You know, if we can't get the talent, we can talk to we're blue in the face, we can have school improvement plans, we can appropriately talk about governance and all the rest, but this is like the centerpiece. And but sometimes it's even nitty gritty. I had to broker a meeting last year between Michigan State and the emergency manager because I'm not saying this fault finding, this happens in other places too, but there was bureaucracy in even getting hired. So before you know it, some really top-notch candidates grabbed another job in another urban area, often outside of this state, because they couldn't quite get through the system in time, and I think we helped remedy that. But those are not as sexy maybe as some of the other things that we work on, but really can have a giant impact. You know, one more of those teachers, very, very well trained, because the state program, the reason that was important is they're getting specific training in educating in urban centers in particular, so.
And the final requirement of the plan requires us to evaluate and report on progress in closing the gaps. And so initially, as we set out, we certainly want to take a look annually at the gap measure that we're starting out with, and the degree to which that is closing or not closing. Additional metrics will be specific to strategies and will be developed in the first phase of implementation of this plan. We will look to publish an annual white paper in collaboration with the Equitable Access Advisory Group that provides a status of the equity gaps and a status and evaluation of the strategies implemented to close those gaps, hopefully specific to various audiences and implications of the findings to the various audiences. I want to note here that our plan to ensure equitable access to excellent educators is an important step to ensuring that every student in Michigan has access to an excellent teacher in every classroom and excellent leaders in every building and every district. But it does not endeavor yet to be the final word on how we achieve equity, right? Rather, its purpose is to set the vision for the activities that need to take place in order for us to get to effective solutions. And so we're now engaged in the stakeholder engagement phase 2, which is where we're gathering feedback on the proposed content that I've provided an overview of today. That goes through roughly May 29th, as the plan is due to USED on June 1st. We have set up an independent website, which I provided here, and we're providing links to in other places as well, where all of the materials, including the draft plan, the root cause analysis, the various strategies and reflections of conversations that have been had with other stakeholders are available, and are available with opportunities right there on the website to provide comment. So it's kind of all in one place to absorb and digest all the materials and then provide feedback to us as we continue to refine this plan.
So, board questions, comments? Richard, John?
Did you relate relate your findings to teacher retention and turnover in schools of the various characteristics that you mentioned?
Yes, so that's certainly in that we are seeing high percentages of inexperienced teachers in these schools. The assumption is certainly that is largely attributable to a high degree of turnover and new staff coming in year over year. And thus we are looking to kind of thread that cause and effect through the plan and in the strategies to target retention strategies specifically.
John? And then Kathleen.
Thank you, and thanks for working on this. This is hugely important, as we all know. Did you look at other states that are like us that have incentives for getting the best teachers where they are needed the most? We don't really have any financial other real incentive besides the modest ones, and I'm always wondering, do they work at all? Did you take a look at any of those other states and policies that they have that we don't?
We didn't do a structured analysis for the purpose of this plan, but we certainly engaged in many conversations with other states, and the results seem to be very mixed in terms of the states that have used various funding mechanisms to support that.
One of the benefits of the plans going to the feds will be some analysis of this and helping to share ideas. I mean, I can't remember which city, but one of the cities, I think it was a city initiative rather than a state, actually provided housing for teachers. You know, I didn't think they bought them, but it was apartments that they paid for. Things like that make it, you know, welcoming, number one, that we want you to be part of the community, but also a financial incentive. Kathleen was next.
Well, I want to thank you for the analysis. It's fascinating. I want to follow up on John's point. We've talked before about providing incentives to get teachers to teach in more difficult schools. And in Detroit, it seems like the incentives are backwards. They're not incentives. They're these. Well, in the last 8 years or so, they have, especially with the diminishing number of students, they lay off all the teachers. And some of the teachers don't find out till the day that school starts what school they're going to teach in. And then I've talked to a couple of teachers who were assigned to 3 schools in the same day. She didn't know where to go. So that's not exactly an incentive to want to teach in Detroit, which needs good teachers. So that's another reason, with the emergency manager, that's another minus for the emergency manager. But how do we counteract? I think the only way to counteract that is to provide financial incentives. And I think that's one way for the legislature to help Detroit, is to provide a financial incentive so that they get good, experienced teachers. The other problem is that many of the principals and it might be policy for the district, they're laying off the experienced teachers because they are paid more in order to save money, and they hire all inexperienced teachers who are cheaper. And they might be great, enthusiastic, wonderful young people who really want to do good, but it's not as easy as they think it's going to be, and it's tough. So they need somebody experienced to help mentor them, and they're not there. So that's another problem, and that's local decision-making, I realize, but it's based on the fact that they try to save money, because there's not enough money. So that's another reason. That's one way for the legislature. Instead of one big pot, they could do it in little pots, maybe, and it wouldn't seem so daunting. But that would be one way to help Detroit get, not only Detroit, but Detroit, Flint, Saginaw, other districts, Benton Harbor probably, get experienced, some good, solid, experienced teachers.
Thank you. Lupe and Michelle.
Okay, well, I always say that the teacher is the heartbeat of a school district, and it is the truth. We are the people that are in front of the students every single day. Now, we can have the best staff development, the best technology, the beautiful building, everything. But if we don't have support, I mean, not support with all this equipment, support on a daily basis. I worked in urban schools all my life. And so we need support. You're doing a good job. I really like that bulletin board. I really like how you talk to Johnny. We need that constant support every day, because going to teach, I'm going to tell you, it's one of the most difficult jobs there is. We have all these little bodies, little minds sitting in front of us, and all of them have their own lives, their own problems, their own challenges, and you have to orchestrate the group to learn, whether it be groups or together on a computer, whatever. You are the conductor, and so, but if we don't get support, and some teachers are in different levels of readiness. I did it on my own. I was my own support system if they didn't give it to me, but not all of them have their own support system. All of them are in different readiness levels, and some need more, and so if we want to have those experienced, excellent teachers that we're talking about, everybody's hearing me out there in the school districts. They have to support their teachers on a daily basis, a pat in the back every single day, because we're creating and polishing those brains, and the teachers need support. And that's what I hear all over the state. Anywhere I go, the teachers say the same thing. We need more support.
Thank you. Michelle and Melanie.
I would say they need support, and they need to have a voice in the policies in their school, and they need not to be blamed for all of the test scores, when the test scores correlate to poverty among anything else. So it's sort of like, if you go and you decide to dedicate yourself into a high poverty, urban, minority, whatever area, you better know that it's gonna be really rough, and chances are you'll be evaluated poorly because the test scores of the kids. So, there's a lot of pressure because of this to not go there, or not even to go to teaching at all. I mean, there's like, we've got a 38% drop in the people entering teacher prep programs. So, so the ones who come out, you know, like, I agree with what Kathy was saying, there's just like there's a lot of disincentive. And I don't think, I mean, I think paying teachers a good living wage, especially those in charter schools that pay about $20,000 less, it would be a good thing. But I think even more is for teachers to have a voice. And right now we have legislation that they cannot even negotiate or grieve the evaluation process on which they are evaluated. Why would you want to work in a situation where it's so unfair? Where somebody can just come in and give you a bad evaluation and you can't even challenge it? Even if it's completely implemented improperly? And then you're evaluated on, you know, standardized test scores. So I think all of that feeds into this. And I think not only should we be reflecting on the things that you're reflecting on, which I think are important, but I think the bigger picture is that the reform has had many unintended consequences, and one of them is people are not going to want to teach or stay in these high poverty schools because the deck is stacked against them, and they are not going to be treated fairly when they are there, and they'll be blamed for all the problems of poverty, which some reformers want to ignore. So.
If I could just mention one thing, because it came up twice today. We were instrumental in getting in the law the word growth. So it isn't the raw test score. It's still a very difficult lift, all those things you mentioned, but I only want to clarify that
I know the growth is better, but it's still statistically invalid by the American Statistical Association. So, they still say even the VAM or the value added is still not, because if you're in an enriched upbringing, you're going to continue to have throughout the school year extra enrichment and experiences that's going to.
Right, but I not only agree with that, that's why we have said we don't think there's a fair system ready yet to measure growth. But I wanted to clarify, in case someone's watching and wants to be a teacher in an urban setting, that it isn't on the raw score and will never be. But you're right, until we have a fair growth measure that you could say beats those inhibitors that you described. I get that. Melody was next.
So I think that Lupe and Michelle read my mind on several things that I was going to say. When Lupe is talking about support, I think in addition to recognition, which is really important to be able to say, hey, you're making a difference, hey, you're making an impact. And teachers who are in high poverty schools might not get that from their surrounding community or, you know, from the parents of the kids that they're working with, because they might not just be as involved as in other areas. So I think it's important to find ways to highlight the great work that the teachers are doing in those areas. In addition, though, I think another level of support is they need other people in the classroom with them. They can't just be doing it on their own. They need parapros. They need, social worker, counselors. We don't have a counselor at my school, and that's so hard for us already, and we don't have the same level of emotional needs and, the things that these kids come to school with. So the teacher cannot do those things on their own successfully. Basically, they'll be managing all those things and not being able to instruct kids. So I think that support in the sense of, other people in the school is so important. And then as Michelle's talking about voice, I don't know with what was proposed today for Detroit, if teachers were even considered to ask what they think or what they need, or, in a school setting, if they're given leadership opportunities or chances to impact the curriculum or the resources or whatever it is, or if they even have time to collaborate. I think all of those things are what makes a teacher feel valuable and important enough to stay. So I think that the support, the recognition, and the voice are going to be even more powerful than extra money or incentives, which again, I think are nice, but that's not really why teachers have gotten into this. But you do feel beat up after a while, and if you don't have somebody lifting you up from the other side, then that's why you leave.
Thank you, good points. Pamela, please.
I just wanted to express that I really appreciated participating in that first phase, in the stakeholder group. And I'm not sure of who facilitated, but I know that you helped to arrange that. But it was an awesome facilitation. I've participated in many facilitated input gathering efforts like that, but the technology that was used and the way that we were just seeing the real-time input, how it was being matched up to solutions was awesome. But really, the diversity of the group that was there were charter operators, charter school authorizers, as well as folks from all over the state, as you've mentioned, educators, just a wide range of folks who are part of the education world. But some of the things that you all are raising were definitely fully fleshed out and fully thought through, and the educators were really able to talk about even this incentive issue, that not necessarily that they wanted more money. I mean, even if it was an incentive that was given, it could be something like time off or time away from the classroom. But just to assure you all that this conversation and the things that you all raised were really, really able to be listed, but then even talk through, and then even further discuss through how do we match this up to solution. And I was really impressed with the tools that they use to be able to do that. So just to be, you all can rest assured that the things that you all are bringing up were fully talked through.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks so
Can I
much.
just clarify?
Yes, ma'am.
One thing. When I said incentives to teach in Detroit, it's not to give them make their salaries higher than other people's, it's to bring them up to other people's, because many of them they've taken cuts, and their salaries are the lowest in the Detroit metropolitan area, which doesn't make any sense at all.
And that was really brought up. I mean, we really talked about how educators are facing the same stressors that the folks that are coming to, the students that they're having to interface with and help, and even the issues that are raised with them having to deal with those type of students. But we really talked about a lot of that. So I mean, the group really brought up some really, I mean, I think we articulated and really thought out several of the problems. I don't know if any of that will show up in some sort of a report as well. Okay.
And just think about this, to Kathleen's point. If that $1,100 that's on the back of each kid right now could be converted, because the state, in my view, should do an appropriation, that's over $30,000 a classroom.
Right.
So even if the teacher only received a piece of that, and frankly should receive most of that, you could almost overnight change that dynamic, because that's for a classroom of 30, which, by the way, a lot of these are much higher than that. But,
Right.
so think about that.
Would be very
That's
helpful.
the 1,100 doesn't sound like a lot until you realize what it could do in each classroom to take care of that salary gap. Melanie.
Just real quick to kind of add to what Pamela is saying, when we were at the U.S. Department of Education a few weeks ago, somebody who's done research expressed that if teacher salary had increased at the same rate as spending per pupil over the last 20 years, the average salary would be $120,000, so double what it is now. And how there are teachers who have second jobs as, taxi cab drivers and bartenders and all these things, just to be able to survive and meet their basic needs. And if people, a friend of hers who was in a taxi would have people from the U.S. come in and say, oh, what a great job for you to have, what a great second job for you to have as a teacher. Whereas when people from other countries would learn that she was an educator, they would be,
horrified.
Really disappointed to see that they've taken on a second job as an educator. So,
Thank you. Well, good. Thank you, guys. This is excellent work, and thanks, Pam, for that acknowledgement, too. That's quickly discussion regarding criteria for grant program. I'll give you, this is the Kenny Vento Homeless Students Grants, about a $2 million grant. Any questions for staff? Thank you. Then call to order the afternoon meeting. It's now 2:05 p.m. and a quorum of the board is present. The State Board of Ed meeting of May 12th, is called to order with public participation. And now joining us at the table, Linda and your team on the personalized learning presentation. This is a big initiative within the department, and it's cross-agency, cross-department. And I think the presentation will make connections to several related initiatives around the state that really are trying to promote flexibility for individual student success. We don't all learn the same way. So Linda, take it right over.
Thanks,
you.
Mike. This is one that we've been really excited to
And
build.
you know, I don't know if I had a chance to say this the last meeting because I don't think it happened yet, but Linda's doing double duty. When I asked her to take over the interim job and continue as director, she's certainly getting help from Michelle and Stephen to do that, but appreciate it very much, and you're doing a great job.
Thanks, Mike. This is one we've been excited to get to the point that we could bring it to you and to share with you some of the things that are going on in personalized learning. Before we actually start the presentation, 2 introductions. First, Greg Dion, who's in the back here, who is the supervisor of curriculum and instruction in the Office of Education Improvement and Innovation, and he's leading this work, and I want to acknowledge him and the work that he's been doing for this. And then I know that you've met her because we do the introductions every month, but Michelle Rybant has formally joined our office and is the State Director of 21st Century Learning, which combines educational technology and our curriculum and instruction. So serves as an assistant director in my office, and we're just excited to bring those 2 initiatives together because it's where we think some real change can take place.
And I have to say, I mean, literally like 2 weeks after we brought her on board, she received the highest honor at McCall, which is really saying something from the technology users, 5,000 at that conference, to see what she's pulled off in the UP, and now it's going to help us pull off is just sensational. So congratulations, Michelle.
So it's exciting. It's really exciting. I think if we were to get started, you've seen us at the table from OEII most recently working on standards, whether it was social studies or science. We've been coming in and we've been talking about those standards. And they are very important because they do set the frame. But they are discrete individual elements that make up learning as a whole and what students need to know and be able to do. However, those discrete elements, if they can't be brought together into something, will not mean much of anything. The comma goes here. This is a capital A. And so we need to bring them together into something. And so when we talk about career and college ready, we kind of are looking at the student who can bring forth and be able to do a variety of tasks. Can they present arguments and reasoning? So can they read a series of articles and be able to take a position and argue that position and articulate the reasoning behind their position? Doesn't have to be left or right, up or down, but it does have to be reasoned. Can they solve problems? Can they communicate and collaborate? So can they communicate whatever their solution is to others and then collaborate with others to bring it to a whole? And can they use technology and other tools in order to make a reasoned decision and to communicate that to the rest of their peers or around the world, as it were, as you saw this morning? That is an example this morning of personalized learning. The students that you saw were able to take an integrated approach to something, and they were able to personalize that to themselves and then bring it together in a whole and apply it and think of all of the things that they learned just by participating in that activity. So this morning's presentation is one that is an example of personalized learning. Michelle's going to present to you some of our concepts around personalized learning and what it is and what it is not and some of the things that we're doing. And we think it's really quite exciting.
It is very exciting. So this is really the contextualization of a lot of the things that we're working on in OEII and beyond throughout the department, really. At the top is that personalized learning goal so that all students will be engaged in their own education with relevant content and all of the standards represented, et cetera. The multi-tiered systems of support is really that systems piece, and we'll talk about that at the end, but that is really key to the way systems are organized in order to have personalized learning occurring. In the middle, the intentional instruction integration, competency-based education, and flexible learning options are what we'll talk a little bit more about as well. If we look at personalized learning itself, these are the 3 components that really make that up. And these are the department's definitions that we use across the department for personalized learning, personalized teaching, and educational technology. And you can see that built into those are a lot of student-level choice So students have a choice in the way that they're learning and kind of what they're learning, especially around relevance. Their proficiencies are measured and they're constantly aware of where they are against the standards and competencies. So that really good feedback about where students are doing enhances that intrinsic learning that they are themselves involved with and that journey that they're on, K-12 and beyond. Personalized teaching relies heavily on collaboration with other teachers and other stakeholders, as you were saying, Melody. It takes many people to support a classroom of learners, and those other adults that are in the building and beyond are really key to personalized teaching and multi-tiered systems of support. The idea of student ownership in their teaching and learning, how engaged are they in that, is really part of this equation as well. And then educational technology, one of my favorite topics, but that access to meaningful technology and devices, how it allows students to customize their own learning. We know through several research endeavors that it really ups student engagement. And then the use of data for that timely feedback at the teacher and student level. A personalized learning schema really has the student at the center. And this diagram really says it all. Students are in the center of their own learning. They have technology available to them, but they also have supports through adults, other teachers besides just their classroom teacher, coaches and mentors within the system, other students, the whole emphasis on collaborative learning. There's so much information that says students learn from each other really, really effectively and beyond. As far as the department goes, we're really supporting some of those things on the outer circle of where students are. Access to really good content through the curriculum alignment efforts that we're involved with, through some digital content efforts that we're involved with, and then through that ability for students to be aware of where they are in their own learning through data systems, and then also learning management systems, which allows teachers to really leverage technology to keep in communication with students and deliver differentiated levels of content to all students. That customization that can happen at the individual student level is really being enhanced through technology. We're in partnership with TRIG, the Technology Readiness Infrastructure Grant. That access to devices has been greatly enhanced. Really, literally hundreds of thousands of devices are now in the hands of teachers and students for use in their own learning. So that personalized teaching and learning model is greatly enhanced. There are some examples around Michigan that really showcase the personalized learning efforts that are underway. Some of our teachers have been highlighted in the Connect newsletter, and we're really proud of that. And locally, we've initiated the personalized learning vignette webinars. Those are just kicking off and getting underway, and they highlight numerous examples around the state of Michigan where schools and teachers have put personalized learning into place, and it's really working on behalf of all their students. At the personalized teaching level, and I think this is one thing to make very, very clear about all of this, is that teachers are really at the center of all of this, and they are really now responsible for brokering almost the education of all the students in their classrooms. That is a hard task. We talk a lot, and you've heard a lot about differentiation over time, but now when you add in all the digital content that's available for teachers and students, and the devices that students are using to access those things, and the data that people are reviewing in order to make it the most contingent teaching and learning possible, is really quite a feat. So how are we supporting teachers in those endeavors? And again, it's the simplification of access to data through a lot of initiatives in the past and currently. It's really helping schools and teachers look at content critically to see what would be the most valuable for use in their setting. And then it's to enhance the communication for teachers with other teachers and with some of the school support personnel that you were mentioning, Melody, the social workers, mentors, external agencies that are there for support. And then enhancing the communication with parents. I know that if any of you have students of your own, through the student information systems and through emails and texting and Facebook, all that enhanced communication with parents really goes a long way to personalized teaching. And then, of course, the enhanced collaboration with other teachers. And I think McCall is a good example of that. There are a lot of teacher networks that have popped up that are specifically put in place to support teachers. And the number of teachers blogging about specific topics and joining all kinds of external professional development supports that are technology enhanced is just off the charts. And it really helps because teachers can throw a question out and get an immediate answer or immediate way to solve a problem that otherwise would have taken a lot more time. So what does it look like when all of this is coming together? It's really that intentional instructional practice. When you have standards, school culture, and instruction that comes together, that's all enhanced with the use of technology in the classroom and a good understanding of standards, that is really the ideal system and support for personalized learning and personalized teaching. At the educational technology level, it's really about access. It's also about adequate training. And I think that teachers have said, and we've heard loud and clear, that they need continued support and professional development around how to effectively use technology within the classroom. And those efforts are underway. The Trigg Classroom Readiness activity, we served over 3,000 teachers just last year and more this year, 7,000. So their need is there, the needs are being addressed. But again, remember those informal networks that are also enhanced by technology, those blogs, those professional learning networks that are supported by technology. But the educational technology at the student level does enhance engagement. If students can follow a learning path that is specific to them and they can enhance and find out more about their own interests and do a little career exploration along the way, that really, really enriches the whole experience for students. And then again, that data use, we could not monitor student level data to the level that we need to without those technologies of student warehouses, all the universal screening data in place. This is a point of pride that came up just recently in Michigan. In the Keeping Pace with K-12 Digital Learning, this is the 11th year they've been monitoring states and the District of Columbia on their flexibility for learning options for students. And Michigan has a great rating. We're one of only 18 in the states and District of Columbia in that regard. And this really looks at policies, legislation, and access to content that students and schools have. So with the things that we have in place around seat time waivers, 21F for courses, we have Michigan Virtual University, Michigan Virtual High School in place for many, many years. These are the things that got us to this rating, and those flexible learning opportunities that we have for students in Michigan is really, really advanced with regard to the rest of the country. We continue to monitor these reports and work in partnership with Michigan University, Michigan Virtual University, and other content providers on keeping this up and making sure the schools are accessing this along the way. We also have to be careful about quality. When you have a great flexibility, you have great responsibility for quality. And I know that course quality, both classroom level course quality and then online course quality, is an issue. We're participating in Equality Matters trainings with Michigan Virtual University. They are actually providing training for all intermediate school districts within the state of Michigan and offsetting the costs of those trainings so that regions and statewide, we can start to take a critical look at the courses that are available online through multiple vendors and then also through a lot of homegrown courses that schools are developing on their own. So the course quality indicators that are part of Equality Matters are now represented in the Michigan course catalog. And I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at that, but there are over 100,000 offerings now in Michigan for students and schools to take advantage of. Where the quality indicators in those courses, as you can see there, have started to pop in. So this is a project that's now in its beginning of its third year. And we know not only the course quality parameters that are part of the content itself, but also how many students attempted that course and how many students completed that course. So as schools and parents and students start to take a look at the online courses that are available to them in the state of Michigan, they can also get some quality indicators around that as well. So this is something that is in place and growing, and will really give people assurance that the courses that they're choosing and participating in are meaningful, aligned, and will get them along their way academically. If we think about competency-based systems, this really represents a shift in thinking, and it sort of brings together a lot of the work that we're doing within OEII and beyond. But to move schools and ourselves from traditional systems and traditional thinking to more of a competency-based system, you can see those comparisons. And these things really are underway and are put in place in many areas. But we're moving away from credit-based participation and seat time. And we've all heard those terms thrown around, but really moving to a credits based on proficiency in contents requires a big change in the way a school system operates. Because it's not about you sit in a course and then you get a grade and then you're done. It's really about what do you know, what can you demonstrate that you've learned, and how can you move along quickly through the content standards so that you can enhance your opportunities beyond. And this changes everything about the way report card systems are done, class standing, all of those things are really part of this mix, and it's exciting to see that play itself out. Pacing-wise, content pacing is not dependent on lesson delivery by a teacher exclusively. The content pacing can be variable, so students can move through their learning at all different paces. And that also represents some structural challenges. If you're a third grade student that really is capable of fifth grade math, how do we get you there? Some schools are flexible enough that students just walk down the hallway and go to the fifth grade class. But that takes a lot of logistical alignment within the school itself. If you can do that online by providing some modular-based learning pathways for students in the same class while they're in third grade, exposing them to fifth grade content, and then assessing them accordingly, that allows you to move students within the system much more quickly and really based on their mastery around the content rather than how old they are chronologically. And again, it's a challenge to pull that off logistically, but the schools that are doing it are finding great results because students are always being challenged at the appropriate level with their understanding, and it's very exciting to watch. The reporting is not going to be based on marking periods as much. So there's a lot more interim assessments, interim reporting, testing out type models that are being put in place to honor where students are around their understanding and competencies. Again, logistically, if you're the counselor issuing credit, and if you're the person that's keeping track of how many students you have in 9th, 10th, 11th grade, this really challenges those systems pieces, but it's exciting to watch because it is the most, it is a big step in personalizing learning for students.
And
The
can I just-
assessments.
Michelle, I'm sorry, if I could just interject, a lot of the very legitimate concerns the board has brought up today about the standardized testing, we have to kind of remember on a day-to-day basis, it's really what the teachers are doing with these interim assessments and the rest. And that our whole system of the MMC is not based on courses, it's based on giving credit for proficiency. And that's determined not by standardized tests, that's determined by what the local district, the teacher, and others determine is they've read. And if you look at the research, it's overwhelmingly supportive of kind of what you're getting at, that we've got this burden of standardized tests hanging over us because of Fed laws and all that, but the real essence of assessment where it happens best is at the classroom level with the teacher. And they know best whether the child is succeeding or not. So, I mean, you know, it's so much in the press all the time, and we have to do the M step and the rest of that, which serves a purpose. It's just this, what's going on day to day, most of the time has nothing to do with any of that. It's trying to make these assessments of proficiency based on the
It kind of
teacher.
sounds though like we're taking the teacher out of the equation at this point.
I think
a lot
that
of this
Michelle
is
can help with that.
online.
I think
Okay.
Michelle can help you understand that role here.
It actually really accentuates the role of the teacher because teachers know best where their students are around their learning. And so if the teachers had the authority to, you know, determine when students were ready to take even standardized state level assessments, that would be really a big move forward. And it puts the teacher, again, at the center of where they're understanding where their students are and when they're ready to move on, when they're ready to be tested, when they need to come back and work more on some things where misconceptions exist. And so that multi-systems of support that we'll talk about in a minute is really key to all this, so that teachers really are in the driver's seat of keeping their students on a learning continuum with other systems in place that can help support each student.
I think one of the differences is it's no longer the teacher standing in front of the room, diagramming, lecturing, leading in that way, but rather the teacher in consultation with the child and the parents about what is in that child's best interest and helping that child move forward at that child's pace, pulling them back when it's not working so well, and saying, well, now I guess I've got to go back to the more traditional models, but a variety of models of teaching, with the teacher always at the center helping to guide that child's learning.
Exactly.
So are there schools actually doing that with the child can go from the 3rd grade to the fifth grade math? And that's actually being done in some schools?
Yes, several schools. And some of them are highlighted in the webinars that we're talking about, and others are just, we know that they're in practice.
How many would you say? Do you have any idea?
Well, dozens. Dozens of schools have a complete sort of standards-based or competency-based model where they do move students along. Remember, it takes a lot of monitoring of where students are at, so they have to have people, and it's often intervention staff that are really reviewing that data and saying, you know, so-and-so has demonstrated mastery of the competency, they're ready to move on. And whether they move physically outside the classroom or just they move along in a individualized learning pathway, that's what's happening.
That's terrific.
It is.
Glad to know that.
It's very exciting to see.
Michelle?
On the bottom, oh, I'm sorry.
Michelle had something.
I know there's been a lot of debate around this in the higher ed, because there's been moves by online vendors and big names to move to a competency base and to get the financial aid available to them, and to change the standards on which to access financial aid in the Pell Grants. So, so my association with it is it's a moneymaker for some folks. Now, I don't know if it's a bad moneymaker or a good moneymaker, but I tend to think if it's going to be, it depends how it's implemented. And if it's being done where it's this, you know, to me, when I went to the, it's also reminiscent of the EAA stuff, where they said anytime, any place, any pace. But the content put on there was not very good content. The people evaluating were, you know, were not necessarily experienced teachers with, you know, it was done on it was to provide a low cost. It was more, to me, the emphasis was more on providing low cost and testing of, you know, this online to make it a profit somewhere down the line. So I'm just letting you know, all these red flags are going off in my head, because, and I'm very cautious
Michelle,
with regard to implementation.
Can I make a suggestion? There's a lot to talk about on this topic, and then we got some other topics. Maybe if we could let them get through their presentation, then let's raise these issues, because I had some similar different things.
Sorry.
No, it's important stuff.
And just the last bullet on the right, the content is delivered and accessed through multiple pathways, including out-of-school activities. And this is really a way of bringing in after-school, summer programming, community-based learning into the classroom. The competencies are a collection of standards that roll up into what a student knows and can do. And here you can see that the standards would be those things issued are down on the bottom in the red, and they roll up really to a broader competency about what a student knows, that's all the underneath and the underpinnings, what they're assessed against in the blue boxes there, and then what they can do when they have demonstrated within this system of learning progressions or competencies, what they're able to do at the end of the day. And this is really a good graphic to demonstrate the way the standards roll up into that. And then there's a lot of talk and thinking about how do we recognize and value the way that students learn today. This is very exciting. This is a very exciting way for schools and students themselves, teachers, to honor the way that students are learning today. Michigan Department of Ed is the only state department that's looking at ways to support open badging in schools, in after-school programming, and in summer programming. So what is an open badge? Badges are free and open. That means that they're not confined to any one system. They're transferable, they're electronic and digital, and they can move around across multiple systems. They're stackable, so students collect a variety of badges. And this is an evidence-based practice that really speaks to intrinsic learning, micro-credentialing, and really honoring competencies. What is a badge? A badge is a digital icon that contains in it, when you click on it, a variety of information. Aside from just the name, there's description. There's very specific criteria that can be built into a badge about what a learner has to do in order to earn that badge. There's the issuer. So issuers can be individual teachers in the classroom. They can be school-wide. They can be community-based. They can be after-school providers, 4-H, FIRST Robotics, etc. The date, and then the evidence that the student had to bring forth in order to earn the badge can also be what's called baked into that badge. If there are standards represented or skills, those are also delineated within the badge. We've been involved in several exciting projects, and I'll really just cut to the chase. Through the 4-H project, we did a energy camp last year with 4-H and at Michigan State University. And that was our first real involvement with badging as far as standards alignment, and then a mechanism for students to access those badges through the technology that they had available. This year, we've been working all year with the FIRST Robotics coaches around the state, and a subset of coaches are developing badges for use next year in FIRST Robotics. And there's several different badges that they're working on. So some students participate, but they're involved in electronics or engineering design or the marketing of the team. So there are very specific badges that are being created around the FIRST Robotics program. The Be Summer Smart is an exciting new one in the city of Detroit with Detroit Public Television. So there are 16 sites around the city that will be offering student activities throughout the summer, and the students will be able to earn badges for those activities that they complete. It's not just about participation, it's really about what you're doing within your learning. And then mybadges.org is a site that's been developed through the TRIG project where students and teachers can go to create and access their badges. And when the students earn the badges, they store it themselves in a digital backpack. One of the things that we're really on the front end of here is how do we bring badges into traditional student information systems for ultimate placement on a transcript. So this is something that we're working with a lot of partners on through the TRIG project, the data hubs, student information systems, to find a way for students to acknowledge student learning through badging. A lot of badging will be through the schools themselves. Some will be through after-school partnerships, some will be through summer, some will be at the community level. So schools are really going to have to set up a way that they have to gauge that criteria of the badge and whether or not it should be something that's brought into the system. We've been working across the department with CTE, special ed, and others, as well as the workforce advisory group, to determine what would be important on a transcript, not only around course completion and where you are academically, but then in regard to this other learning that students do. We're also working on and quantifying all the flexible learning options that Michigan has. Our dual enrollment numbers are going way up. The blue bars in the upper right, that indicates the 9th and 10th grade students that are now taking advantage of dual enrollment since the changes in policy a couple of years ago. You can see that those numbers are steadily going up. And again, if you can move students through a competency-based system more quickly, they will have more time in their high school careers to take advantage of things like dual enrollment. The personalized curriculum numbers are also going up. So this is another flexible learning option available within the state, so the number of students and the number of schools participating continue to go up around personalized curriculum. On the right is the seat time waiver numbers. Those have really leveled out as far as the number of students participating and the schools participating. But again, that is a very flexible learning option for students to take advantage of. And putting this all into a systems ending is that idea of multi-tiered systems of support. and how we can leverage technology and leverage really rigorous standards and instruction for all students as a baseline, and then have systems in place in each school so that students can migrate in and out as they need help in certain content areas or with certain skills into and out of the other tiered systems. Tier 3 would be fewer students, usually about 20% max, that need additional supports along the way, and then Tier 3 would be one-on-one. They need interventions that are more intense based on their understanding of the standards, competencies, and skills. And the last one is really just an example from Cedarville High School up in my old area. This doesn't look like all of the graphs and charts to students. It really looks like active learning. And this is a group of students that is part of a STEM course. They have a robotics component in each of their STEM years. And they've had underwater robots. They've done FIRST Robotics as part of this. But most recently, they built and used a drone to start looking at some of the environmental things that are happening in the Cedarville area. And they brought in an expert that was doing research in the area from Loyola. When that researcher found out what these students could do, they instantly became a part of that research project. And now their drone pictures are submitted to Loyola multiple times throughout the year for their ongoing work around invasive species in the Salation Island area. So those students, by bringing an expert into the classroom, became experts about the issue, and they're really supporting this now.
Those are students engaged in active learning. They sit in the classroom and they might learn principles about physics and principles about biology, but then their active learning is going out with the drone that they built and capturing the information and then feeding that back not only to themselves for learning, but also to an actual entity, grown-up world entity, making use of that information.
Thank you, guys. Great. John, Cassandra?
Let me get back to the concern Michelle had, but let me just try to reframe it. One, this is very important, and thank you for bringing this to us, because I think it exposes, as we talked about last time, many really good, exciting things, as well as many of the challenges in this topic. So, and I think I'm addressing this mostly to our two superintendents. We have to be, on behalf of the department, knowing there's other agencies and the governor who have this agenda, very discriminating about what version of personalized learning are we animating. And because there are certainly those and many who, of course, kids learn differently, they have different needs, they should be able to learn in the way that works best, at their own pace, and whatever content works helpful for them. But there are also those who promote personalized learning as a way to get a la carte education, more vendors into the system, whether kids learn or not, competency-based, more online, whether kids learn or not, to open up that window. And so just to illustrate it in your examples, you know, the chart on page 10 about are we like totally online, to me that looks like it was put together by an online vendor association, basically saying, are we checking all the boxes that we have unlimited online access and more schools, whether kids are learning or not. It's decoupled from learning. And so it's therefore troubling. But meanwhile, for me, the competency-based education, I know, I'm all for, absolutely, because we got to figure out not whether they showed up, but did they learn something? Did they learn something that was delivered in different ways? But did they learn something? Did they master the content? Did they master the content, not the inputs? And things like badges are excellent, you know, ways to represent. Did they master some content? Did they gain some competency? So I'm just cautioning us, there are different agendas loaded in this agenda. There are those who want to promote unlimited alternative ways of learning and delivery of services and vendors like online. And there are those who want to more flexibly personalize learning so that every kid does learn better. And we just have to be very discriminating about which of these are we animating in particular policies and practices.
Let's try, maybe use 10 as an example. Speak to page 10 just a moment.
This is actually reported, and I have the whole report with me. It really speaks to the flexible learning options that we put in place with legislation and policy. I totally agree that we need to do that very discriminating, in a very discriminating way. But there is very good digital content that can be used, and by making that available through seat time waivers, blended learning within the classroom setting, et cetera, those are the kind of flexible options that we really would like to see our students take more full advantage of. Dual enrollment is another example of flexible learning.
And you know, a little bit of this, to get at John's point about animating, which is worth not only discussion today, but further discussion, is a little bit of this that we were dealing with is they were already running ahead as a decentralized local control system with some real crap online. You know, I walked around, I went into
They is,
local districts,
okay.
and they were just contracting themselves, and we're looking at some of this. I went behind some kids one day, I came back here and said, oh my God, you know, this isn't learning. And so what I'm getting at is our role is trying to, I don't want to say put the genie back in the bottle, but put it in a way that makes sense, very much along the way John just described it. I think you would, if you sat in on some of our internal meetings, you'd hear that same thing.
I have no doubt that our motivations in the department are good. However, even this chart.
Let me finish, if I may, on that, though, John, just for a second, because what I'm getting at is that the danger we saw was the very thing you're seeing, which we would agree with, was getting out of control on a local level, because people were just saying, geez, I can sign up quickly, it's cheap for me, and I'm actually saving some money towards our money problem. So please continue.
Right. But I would not be celebrating this particular chart, because as framed here, it basically says it is a very good thing that we have now lifted caps on numbers of charter schools, or numbers of online vendors, and numbers of students that can enroll, without any coupling of that are the kids actually learning, and that we're seeing growth in kids learning through these vehicles. If anything, we, as you know, opposed expansion until we have evidence that they learn, and other states are walking back the number of online vendors that can operate because the kids don't learn as well. So celebrating fuller access is not consistent with effective competency-based or learning outcomes necessarily. More access or for vendors, more cyber schooling does not in and of itself deliver personalized learning. It delivers more vendors. So this chart I would not celebrate. It's not part of a strategy of being great on this stuff, because the kids aren't learning more in some of these variants, whereas much of the other things in here are very good examples of how we can help more kids learn in their own unique way. But that's not for you. This is for our superintendents, how the department participates in this agenda. You know, is about helping more kids learn in ways that are effective for them, not providing more. There are those who have the agenda, more access for vendors to sell something, whether kids learn or not, increasing numbers of people who participate in those, whether they're learning or not. That's not our agenda.
Right, it's not our agenda either, and that would be Brian's agenda. I think what I'm trying to, I'm repeating myself, but this had gone wild in a way beyond anything we could imagine, even before you and I, as state superintendent, opposed the cap coming off cybers. This was in the traditional schools where all of a sudden they're buying stuff and they're contracting with places that hadn't been tested and it wasn't clear. And I would say in almost all the cases, no malice. Some cases, I think this was looked at, that's cheap, I don't have to hire a teacher, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, part of this is to your point about policy that we could do, you could do as a state board to encourage local boards not to accidentally get hooked into something just to save money when you haven't really had quality factors. But I can assure you, especially with Michelle coming on board, even with our team here prior, that that's exactly what this is about. And we probably need to understand a little bit more on what you're maybe you have, I get it conceptually, do you see something?
I'm just reacting. I would not, again, I'm not faulting anyone here. I'm just saying we have to discriminate. Some of this celebration of more ways to make learning flexible is counterproductive to learning, or some of the tactics and techniques and policy approaches like unlimited cyber, whether kids learn or not. Some of the approaches, many of them, are very effective for how we can help more kids learn better. And I'm all for that. I'm all for busting up the traditional way that we educate kids, seat time, everyone go at the same pace. You know, we've got to learn how to do that very differently. But it's got to be about helping all kids learn, not an alternate version of personalized learning, which is more vendors get to sell stuff whether kids learn or not.
Richard. I'm sorry, Cassandra was next, then Richard, apologize.
I have a few questions and an overarching comment, so I can either do them all at once or we can move around. But my first question is, I don't recall hearing us talk about the philosophy of competency-based education at this table before. Am I incorrect in that? Or is this the kind of the first time that we're rolling it out here?
No, not at all, but this may be the first time there's some meat on the bones with Michelle coming on about the personalized learning. But certainly not competency-based.
Okay. So let me get to some specific questions, and then I'll get into that. On page 11, you talked about the Michigan Virtual University was engaging in Quality Matters. What about the 9 fully online schools or cyber charter schools? Are they also engaging in that?
They've been offered the training in Quality Matters along with the intermediate school districts, and some have participated through their intermediate school districts because that training was just held recently. But they, kind of to your point, oftentimes the cyber schools have a defined vendor, and that vendor provides specific information on their course alignment and those content indicators that we talked about through Quality Matters. And they actually may have gone through iNACOL or some of the other course quality indicators agencies that have those. So depending on where they're getting their digital content determines what rating system would be attached to those.
Remember that the cyber schools are held to the same standards as the other schools as far as student achievement and back to those tests again, but that is one common measure across the state that we can use to determine whether or not what they're doing in those schools is leading up to students mastering content.
The open badges, so is this a program we've purchased? Have we created it? Where did it come from?
It's wide open. It really is. Gaming. It really came out of sort of the gaming industry with students, or for young kids usually. You can earn badges for doing this, that, and the other within certain online gaming systems. But it's really expanded out. I know as an educator, I can earn badges within a lot of micro-credentialing programs that I'm involved with. There are badging within industries. So sometimes the professional development ladder within an industry now has micro-credentialing built in. But the actual mechanics of it are through open source software out on the web, and Mozilla is the biggest educational leader in that regard. So they make a platform available to develop and attach all the specific information to a badge, and then have students collect those badges from a variety of sources.
A couple months ago, we had a presentation on the second worst choice. And the second worst choice.
Talking about almost worst choices?
Almost worst choices. And there was a lot of testing that went in to see if this really was something that young people would relate to.
Right.
I'm just questioning, like, what 17-year-old cares about a badge? So have we done any kind of testing to see if kids actually care about earning badges?
Very interestingly, the high school class that we were involved with last year was a camp for energy, different kinds of energy sources. And before we started, we surveyed all the students in that 4-H week-long residential camp that they do here at MSU. And all of them were interested in earning badges. That was one of the biggest determinations in us going forward. We said, would it be of interest to you to earn a badge for participation in this course? And they could earn a badge in solar energy, biofuels, or wind energy, and all of them were interested in earning one or more badges.
Interesting. That's why you do research, because it
May I
doesn't
comment-
seem...
May I comment quickly on that?
Yeah.
Visiting at the Oakland Intermediate School District's Career Tech Ed Center, it turned out that they were awarding badges along with professional designations for computer certification, which was an international certification. So I could be wrong, but as a staff can comment, from what I was told there, as students earn these certifications, there's no real way for them to give high school credit for something that will be used in a business setting. But this is clearly pre-qualified, it's incredible to be getting this stuff in high school because most people don't access it until they take at least a trade course or a 2 or 4 year college degree. So they were looking for an interface that could give them graduation requirement. That's what I want. Not certification, but endorsement of some sort. Is that accurate?
Michelle?
That's very accurate, and it is very accurate. And we just met with Microsoft a couple weeks ago, actually, Greg and I, to talk about that, to talk with them about their micro-credentialing program within the Microsoft certification suite. And that is something that is of extreme interest to employers. So again, that we need to look at that way of getting that on a student's transcript. If they've gone through the micro-credentialing within the Microsoft Office suite of products, either through the CTE programming or through traditional high school computer courses, the way to acknowledge that is through a badge, a digital badge.
And these are enhancements to the transcript. These are things that kind of ironically, I think, going all the way back to the Cherry Report, before there was this kind of technology, the encouragement of trying to find other ways. So I in that particular case, I think this is, what I was trying to say earlier is this has almost gotten away from us before we've been able to do some of this, because you observe in the districts what they're doing, and in some cases, I would say with no malice, just not realizing they're not contracting with quality.
Well, I'll just say one more thing, and then I'll stop. But I think as evidence of the invitation I extended today, I believe very strongly in active learning. I think it's the fact that we rely so much on testing, which isn't reflective of what you actually learn when you do stuff like this, is what bothers me the most about all of this. But I will say also, coming from the higher ed world, the word competency-based education has such a negative connotation to it. It's like the dumbing down of, it's like a diploma mill. You know, it's pay for a degree as opposed to earn through education. And so I'm concerned about the rigor when it comes to this, and also the implementation. When you have 40 kids in a classroom and they're all learning different things at different times, and you have one teacher who's trying to, you know, manage all of this, how do you know that the rigor's actually there? That you know, students aren't, you know, you'd say, "What would you like to learn today, Johnny?" And you know, Johnny wants to learn baseball, which is great.
We need really great teachers who know how to do that. I mean, that's really hard, but that's the ideal, is they can help 40 kids learn differently, which is challenging. Most
Well,
of our teachers
that's
don't know how to do
wisely said for someone who doesn't stand in front of 40 kids who are trying to learn. But I
just taught a course.
U of M.
Way different, John.
Sixth grade.
Point.
Sixth grade.
No sixth graders.
But I'm very concerned about this idea that, you know, that this could potentially lead, instead of increasing rigor and increasing what young people are learning, that it's actually just checking off boxes on a list. And so
I get your concern,
yeah.
but we'll have to do more to assure you that's not what this is.
Well, the one thing you could do, I did a preliminary
Yeah,
search to see if I could find independent data that demonstrates that competency-based education increased student achievement, and I couldn't find any. So
But we don't have the same definition, so I think we need to do a different job at trying to help distinguish between what your perception of that is in higher ed and what we're trying to do, and probably not just today. We can maybe try to do not a better job, but a little more on that by next meeting if you'd like. But they're very different than what you're experiencing in higher ed.
Well, if you have anything that I can look at, I would
Why don't we in
love to do
mid-month,
that.
let's work at that in mid-month to try to distinguish that, because I would have the same alarms that you're describing in the higher ed model. This is different than that, and if anything, as I said, part of our intent was trying to give guidance to districts that were being sucked in by vendors, frankly, that were just checking off boxes, as you say. So I think this is helping them get ready for a different world, because ultimately they get to choose, you know, or you're going to have an online physics course that doesn't have much rigor, to your point, you're just checking it off, or you're really going to have a robust one that you feel comfortable with and can do well. Richard, you were next.
I share a lot of the concerns that John and Cassandra have shared here. Part of the problem is, now I've been to a lot of seminars and I've heard at presentations here, the suggestion that we want to transition from the seat-based program to the competency, but there are dangers and problems with that. We haven't always thought through what those are. When I joined a Boy Scout-like organization, they had the merit badges, and there were badges for things I already knew a lot about, like American history. And so I did all the, I accumulated 3 or 4 badges and didn't learn anything. But I had more badges than anyone else, Other guys were working on badges they didn't know anything about, and they learned something, and I didn't. So even though they had fewer badges, they had learned more in the program than I had by just taking the low-hanging fruit. And I think that's part of the concern. Vendors step in and say, well, we'll give algebra certification to all the smart kids who already learned algebra in 8th grade. Because if you learn everything that's taught in 8th grade, you've mastered high school algebra. Okay. That's kind of went through my mind when you say, the kid in 3rd grade can take the 5th grade content. It's the same content. It's more practice.
Right.
I mean, there are a few advanced concepts, but if you learned everything they taught you in 3rd grade, you could skip out of 5th grade math because it's the same concepts. You're ready to go on to another group. So what am I saying? The shift from seat time learning to competency, it can be compared to anyone who's had 2 kids take piano lessons. Okay? After the fall, your kids have had the same number of lessons, but the one is playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the other one's still doing chopsticks. Okay? Or you could pay to have both kids learn Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and your first kid would quit by Christmas, and the second kid would go on to the middle of July. So that's the choices in the system that we have to make, and I think we have to use one, and I would advocate the seat time waiver because for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's already what most people are thinking, experiencing, working with. There's a momentum to that. So even though student A and student B will learn different amounts, at least we know that there's some measure of equity. They each got 180 hours of instruction. Okay. As opposed to attempting to bring student B to the point of student A, and it might take student B 3 years to learn what student A learned in 1 year. Okay. So there are implications to that are real that are very problematical. The other thing, I was thinking myself, well, how do these principles apply to something very specific like driver's training? Okay, intentional integration, competency-based, flexible learning options. Fortunately, kids are motivated to learn to drive, and so we can use uniform approaches to driver's education. It's in the other areas where kids are not motivated to apply themselves to algebra, perhaps, or poetry on the other side, where we need different routes or approaches to motivate kids who don't see the utility of what are in the standards already. So I think those are the thoughts that I had there. I don't know. I think we need to keep this stuff in perspective. I too have some reservations about cyber schools, simply because cyber schools are like libraries. You can get a great education in a library, but you gotta. Who's going to supervise the child? There's a few kids that will are motivated enough to learn on their own, so that's why a cyber school is not the same as a traditional school, which provides the supervision as well as the instruction.
Right.
And our policies, I think, need to reflect that difference, and and if we had thought it through and come up with some good policies, we might have had more leverage with the legislature before they adopted this particular.
For new board members especially, that's why we together supported the continuation of the pilots, but not that premature opening the Pandora's box on cyber schools when that happened 2 years ago. So I agree very much with that. We're going to take a stab at this at mid-month and see if we can get at some of those issues. And then I'll make sure, otherwise it's on the August board meeting. Oh, he's back. I thought no, we hear you, and I think we're very closely aligned with that. I just think some of this is terminology that we'll work through with you. So thanks, guys. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Some of this stuff too. I know there have been groups of educators around the state that have been talking about competency-based education and moving away from seat time measurements and all that. That's been going on for a number of years now. And I understand that, and it sounds so good theoretically, but working it out that's the rub, so to speak. But the badges, when you mentioned, I was thinking of the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts badges, and Eagle Scouts, so they get the most badges, but you might be right, they learned it someplace else, but it doesn't make any difference as long as they know it, maybe that's something. But if that could be included on their transcript, that would be helpful, otherwise it's nice for the kids, but it doesn't get them anywhere, except that they've learned something.
Exactly.
That's the thing, but what worries me is this whole business with the cyber schools and this internet is what they're doing in the EAA, or they would try to do. And that was not a good example. It wasn't thought out. The platform was being tested on the kids, actually, and they hadn't really perfected it yet. So I wondered, are there results of the cyber schools that are positive? Any that are positive? The results the studies, the reports that I've read indicate that the kids don't do very well in these cyber schools.
The two that have been in existence the longest now have data that we could provide you in mid-month or something like that, and the others are too new to have that kind of data.
Maybe
amassed.
before the end of the day, we can see where they are on some of our typical measures for all schools.
Those are the ones I'm
Why
talking
don't we
about.
do that?
Well, it worries me because I understand that one of those big companies, the leadership had changed, and the one first guy who made $5 million a year or something resigned as president, and they made somebody new, and it was like a money-making machine. And I wondered how concerned they are about the students. One of the things we've learned about, we used to talk about the rigor, relevance, and relationships, the 3 Rs. Relationships were very critical to the success of the students, or to the learning of the students. And I don't know how much relationship building there is when you deal with a lot of cyber education. And that concerns me, because I think that's one of the strengths. Lupe keeps talking about the importance of teachers. Personal relationship is critical. And I've been talking about this for a long time. It just isn't paid enough attention to, I don't think. I think that we have to keep bringing it up, because in my mind, that's a very vital part of kids learning and wanting to go to school and wanting to be there, wanting to learn. That relationship building.
Right.
So I don't know, I don't want to lose that in all this progress, quote unquote.
We're with you. We're with you on that. Okay?
Yeah.
Moving right along. Approval of minutes.
I move approval of the minutes for both the regular committee of the whole meeting of April 14th and the special meeting of April 24th.
Moved by John,
I wasn't at the April 24th meeting. Can I
So
still vote
moved.
on them?
supported by Lupe.
Trust us.
We're adopting minutes.
Now can I ask my
I just
question?
want to make one
Please, okay.
correction, if that's possible.
Yeah, then just answer.
In the minutes of the last meeting, when Richard was talking about the legislative conference, there was a reference to visiting with Senator Stabenow and Senator Dingell, and Senator Dingell is not yet a senator, she's a congresswoman.
Right.
I think that should be corrected, and I hadn't had a chance to mention it to.
Tell her she's a senator now.
She thanked us for that. She saw
I'm sure she'd like to be a senator.
My question was, is it appropriate for me to vote on the April 24th meeting, considering I was not there?
I think so.
I
On the
always-
minutes?
Then can we separate the two?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so I move approval of April 14th minutes.
Support.
Supported by Lupe.
With that
Any-
correction.
With that correction. Any,
Demoting Senator Dingell.
Right.
Back to Congresswoman.
any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same? Great. Next, is there a motion
And
for
move the April 24th approval of those minutes.
a special meeting by John,
Support.
supported by Lupe? Any discussion, changes? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same?
Abstain.
Abstain. John, President's report.
So briefly, we're working on the time passing transition issues. We're having another special meeting tomorrow. We had one that several of us attended, just to really talk with Brian as a board about how we communicate our protocols for working together with our superintendent and each other, and we're going to continue that tomorrow here, I guess, so it's very process-oriented. We talk a little bit about policy priorities looking ahead, but we're going to do that mostly at the retreat next week, where the first half of the day, Mike and the team are going to talk us through and update us on where we are, what's in progress on our agenda at the moment, and then in the afternoon we can continue with Brian to talk about sort of policy priorities looking ahead, given all that we have in the air and where we are and moving parts, et cetera. So we're going to continue those discussions. We did have a good meeting with the governor, Brian, John Walsh, who's the governor's policy strategy guy, Karen, McPhee, to talk about our relationship looking ahead. We said and agreed we need to meet together periodically with the governor and the leadership of the board potentially, and superintendent as the policy makers, and just review high-level policy priorities where we can agree and help each other. Things like, how do we support at-risk funding enhancements versus other ideas? How do we help support good teacher evaluations, things we talked about? How can we effectively move effective school turnaround, and name things where we disagree fundamentally and how we deal with those constructively. So I think that's good and something we can do coming, moving ahead. And then our superintendent, day to day, will be very active with the governor's office and the legislature and all stakeholders. So we need to continue this kind of dialogue and be very explicit about where we can team up and agree with the governor and others, and where we disagree and how we deal with those disagreements in a constructive way. I think we did also, they did respond to, we made a request to look at the adequacy study as it's set out for bid, and how that bid process, or how that would be framed in terms of inviting people to do that study. John Walsh and Karen got back to me and said, by all means, let's talk about that, and you or your designee can look at that study together. So I talked a bit with Karen and on that. The legislation is very specific. I did look at the legislation per her request. It's they sort of named the 20 things they want the study to do. So there's not a lot to reframe there, shall we say. And I did ask that as they proceed, they'll be active talking with Brian as our agent who's going to be engaged on that kind of the fruits of that kind of study with us, so keep him in the loop on those things. Yeah.
Well, they'd need a new legislation to authorize that now, right?
I guess. I mean,
Because it
I
was
don't know if
part
there's
of
still
the
any question
proposal.
whether they're going to fund it or not. I hope they do. I trust they do. Everyone said they
Yeah, so
would. So
maybe we would want to weigh in on that, urging them to pass.
we could
that.
certainly reiterate that this is an important
Right.
study to do, and do in a timely fashion. I mean, the legislation is very specific, even about, you got to get started in time to hit a deadline of, what, a year from, a little bit ahead, so. So that will be, I view it as one input, We'll get some good analysis from that study about how we should be financing education to get the outcomes that we need, consistent with things that we've worked through as a board. So I think that's it for me.
Okay, as your current superintendent, I do have a report, and Brian's been almost oversensitive to that, and I've assured him, don't worry about it at all. There's so many of these things that are going to bleed over to his time, so I'm not, as I've said to you directly, Brian, as you know, I'm not sensitive at all to things you need to start working on now or interacting with, especially with a fairly lengthy, gap in appointment and begin time, so I'm good with that. I do want to start with something that I think you'll recognize the person in this. Let me just show it, and this is quite an event. That was our own Lupe, if you didn't notice. And one thing that was remarkable, I thought, at this Cinco de Mayo event was that what a great hostess, because I don't think you ate. People were constantly around you, and these kids are marvelous. And just a quick story is their father, who kind of leads this with their mother, this singing group, basically, was a student who was tearing up when I asked him, well, how did you know each other? And he said, she was my teacher and motivated me. I was heading the wrong way. So it was so much about the very things you were talking about today, beyond tests and all that. And you know, you could just see a young man's life that became something very different. It was a great event. Appreciate, Eileen, that you attended also. That was a lot of fun. The Grand Dame, I think we would say. You know, the mayor said, don't mess with her. Just, I said, no, I know. And then just a couple of months ago started this, just give a sense of the month I have. I don't remember to tweet a lot, but when I do, there's a few things to kind of highlight. Yeah, this gave me a chance. This was very heartfelt on my part today with the coins, but I got a lot of feedback because this doesn't show it too well. It's a little bit, I ended up taking Lupe and Eileen and kind of holding their hands up and saying, talk about models of times when you won't agree but can work together and all that. The thing I just genuinely admire so much with this board, and got a big round of applause and got a lot of feedback later that that's what the legislators need to do, is what they said to me. Oh, tornado drill at MDE. Okay, very interesting. That's a hard one for a minute. Student Advisory Council, you know, this is the last one I've had. We've had it for years now. I mentioned to Brian, I think he'd find it really helpful. Our team does too. We all sit around. It's a microcosm, you know, but it gives you a sense pretty quickly. We debrief after and think, we thought we kind of took care of that, and we really don't when you hear a student voice. Oh, yeah. This was so amazing. Right here were two young ladies, and when we're eating lunch, I don't remember why I asked, but something about, I don't remember how this came up, but it turns out both of them, their fathers came over years ago on a raft from Cuba. And they were from different districts, didn't know each other, started connecting, you know, they're trying to get, we should follow up. I mean, it was about the same time we were wondering, you know, would the parents have known each other? So it was very, thanks, Marty, that was a good reminder of that. Attended Night of Notables. I know whenever you can make that, that's Randy and his team over at the library, which is ours now through an executive order years ago. But they had, I'll draw a blank, but Station 11 is a book that was up for, what's the high distinction, not Book of the Year, but there's a,
Booker Prize.
It's not the Booker, it's the best one. And anyway, she was there personally because part of the story is in Michigan. And fascinating, Kyle and I happened to be kind of chatting with her while we're eating.
Post-apocalyptic.
Post-apocalyptic. Post-apocalyptic. Did you read it?
Yeah.
But kind of positive humanity and all that, not like some of the others. I just bought it that night. That's when I went to the Michigan School Business Officials, or maybe that was after, I don't remember, but it was in Detroit. Beautiful night there. That was our team at MSBO. We've got, you know, it's one of the things that when John mentioned the progress and everything that we're doing, you'll get highlights of that as we always do next week but really what we're trying to do every meeting, if you saw the pretty heavy duty things that were reported to you today, that's the real progress, is what we try to report to you every month on what, and catch ourselves if we're a little bit off track, like maybe we've done today on some of the personal learning thing. But that's where that's going to be meaningful. And in this particular case, the field is, these folks, I think, get feedback instantaneously from people in the field. And we've got, I think we've probably had 20 people on that agenda alone. So every one of these conferences is just teams of MDE folks out there, and I thought I'd call that to your attention. School Principals Day, of course, that's appreciated. Their leadership is really tough, too. You know, I think we appropriately talk about teachers all the time, but it's a tough time to be a principal. Appreciate their work. That was Ben, you know, he's just showing off. That was an all-staff meeting, very appreciated. From there. Yeah, tried to help out with the bus tour. The wheels came off. This was because Thank a Teacher Day and just an opportunity, and it's amazing. I don't get a lot of retweets, but 55 like within 5 minutes, and it just shows what Melody was talking about. I try to do it as best I can. I can always improve on that. But any of our positions, you as state board members, any of us sitting here, not just those of us at this main table, a lot of the colleagues here, showing appreciation to Melody's earlier point, that was like 55 within a few minutes. And I think I did it at an odd time of day, or maybe the show's on there.
9 in the
o'clock.
morning.
So, you know, it just, you could see there's a thirst for just even a little appreciation, you know, and it's genuine. Yeah, I don't know if you know Rod Maloney, those of you in the Detroit metro area, but I jokingly said when I was trying to take a picture before I spoke, this was at the Federal Reserve where economics education was being highlighted, and they have an association, MCEE, and so I jokingly said, Rod, get out of the picture. He's the TV guy from Channel 4 or whatever, and he actually was dancing with his chair trying to get out of the picture, so I thought I'd highlight that. Reminded me of my dad the other day. I mean, I still tell our kids, you know, it's hard to believe that from the time he was 17 till 21, he was actually in Europe in World War II. And these are folks we need to remember, of course. At Alliance meeting yesterday, I mentioned Abby. She did a great job, I think, and got some good feedback from them, and that's continuing to come in. Meet with them once a month. Didn't hit me till yesterday. It's taken 10 years. Why do I always go to their place? You know, once in a while I should say, come over here. Why am I always going? But that's a really important group. Gretchen, I thought, who I really admire from the MEA, she went out of her way to say, you know, we're concerned about the testing and we needed to express that, but it's not that we don't understand. Your team's done a magnificent job on MSTEP, and they have. If you look on a relative basis, we're almost 3/4 of the way through. Paul went out of his way, the head of the Elementary Principals Association, to say 24 of his 25 council members went out of their way to say no problems at all. So, I mean, we feel pretty good about this. We're going to be up to, 3 million or so test sessions now? Yeah. And trying to work hard to get results back within a couple of weeks. But one reason this is a no consequence year is we're all learning. I thought you said this beautifully yesterday, Vanessa, when we're kind of going around for the folks that couldn't make the all-staff. And you said, I repeated this at the Ed Alliance, that it's almost like the moonshot, to use our earlier presentation from the kids today. The moonshot that's pretty much succeeding is getting to the moon now with the test. And now the rest of it is getting the folks back from the moon, and that's going to be the test results and trying to do this in a timely manner and all that. But this is a test year for us too, and I wanted to just, certainly in front of the board, as we report to you, that I'm really proud of what they've pulled off. It's very, very big thing. Worked on it for years, as you know. Had a little disruption last year at this time with saying we couldn't use Smarter Balance, but we worked around that. And more good things to come. And I guess by way of introduction of our Teacher of the Year, you know, you just show up everywhere again, and here's another one. Great picture of you. You did a great job at the Governor's Education Economics Summit, and I turn it over to you, Melody. Children's Trust Fund tomorrow night. If anyone's interested, you can get there the last minute for that auction. It's a nice event. It's here in Lansing at the Lansing Center. I sent you something on that, but no pressure, just if it fits in your... I probably should have said a great wine. I'm sorry to invited you up, but just, I don't want to, in the spirit of thanking teachers, the Wyandotte school visit, the last one I'll ever do, was really something special. They just, what we all know, I mean, lots of good things going on. You just have to see them firsthand and appreciate them, and as Brian said, or maybe forget where we said this, but Anna and I hosted Brian and his wife Beth for dinner this weekend, and you're really in for a treat with a guy who's a good leader, excellent leader, and at the same time, I think just a good person. So looking forward to watching that success.
Okay. Before I start with my presentation, Mike mentioned the MSTEP testing, and I've been fortunate to be a voice for teachers this year, and I've been trying to, kind of express not only what I think, but what other teachers think across the state. And while I have not given the MSTEP this year because I'm out of the classroom, I'm hearing from many teachers, even today, who are urging me to just share, the difficulty or the challenges that they've seen for their kids with it, the amount of time that it's taken, the amount of energy, the amount of stress that it's caused. So while I do agree that the department has done an excellent job considering the circumstances, I feel like it would almost be negligent on my part not to mention how the teachers are feeling about it, in honor of their kids, I should say. So as this is a learning year, I hope that feedback will be taken into consideration for future years.
I might just say, because to tie this in together, there's been automatic responses to some of this when we can that next day. For instance, when you left open the, what's the terminology?
We unlocked the ELA test sessions so that they could keep working on them, kind of akin to a paper pencil test booklet. So
Yeah.
just put it away and bring it back out the next day.
So some of that response was immediately fed back. Some can't be till next year, but no question, the length on the ELA has to be addressed. We'll get that.
So I realize that very soon, I should say, that the next Michigan Teacher of the Year will be named. So I'm enjoying the last couple experiences with the state board and excited for the next person who will get to experience all of these amazing things. So earlier this month, I continued with the author visits that I've been able to do with different schools around the state for Diary of a Real Bully and the workshop around bully prevention for kids. So I've been to Pine Tree Elementary in Lake Orion, a couple of schools in Anchor Bay, including Lottie Schmidt and McCants, and I have one more coming up at Lighthouse Elementary in Anchor Bay, Spiritus Sanctus Academy in Plymouth, Devlin Elementary, and Loon Lake Elementary in Walled Lake. So that's been a big highlight of this year, and it continued even past March's Reading Month. Shortly after those, the culminating event of this year for State Teachers of the Year happened with CCSSO Recognition Week in Washington, D.C. So this was a chance for all State Teachers of the Year to come back together and reunite, since we all met in Phoenix and have connected through social media for several months. So it was a homecoming of sorts, and they had some amazing things planned for us. So this picture takes place on the steps of the Biden residence. So our welcome reception, oh, do you want me to go back for a second?
You hadn't noticed.
Yeah. Yes. There's a lot of us, so it's hard to distinguish where everyone is. But yeah, so this is on the steps of the Biden residence. So that was excited. That was actually the first evening that we arrived. We got to go to the home of the vice president and, just have some appetizers and drinks by the pool. So that's something different.
Yeah, from Biden.
The Bidens were supposed to be in attendance, but were unable to make it at the last minute. So they had some representation from the Department of Education there, which was nice. We had a session with Scholastic, which is a great organization that, as a third grade teacher, I rely heavily on their resources and materials, and they're very teacher and student friendly. So it was exciting. We had some great, thoughtful questions for the teachers to be able to discuss on things that we think could be changed in education and improved. And on the picture on the right, they had a book for each of us with our state name. So that was nice to get some Scholastic swag too. We had a Smithsonian Ambassadors Day, which was for all the State Teachers of the Year. We got to choose from different sessions and different Smithsonian museums that we would like to attend. And so I got to go to the National Portrait Gallery, and then we did some work at the Smithsonian Castle, which is the picture on the right. So that was an exciting day to look at the Smithsonian from an educator perspective. Smart Technologies is one of the big sponsors, and each State Teacher of the Year received a smart projector and the equipment and software that goes along with that. So that is a really exciting piece that can come back to my classroom in my school and they offered us technology training in Washington, D.C. as well that was continued from Phoenix. So the most exciting, perhaps, event was the White House visit. So that was done in different parts. First, we arrived and went through security and then got to meet in small groups with someone from the Domestic Foreign Policy Council, which was great, and they facilitated some dialogue and conversation around things that were important to us. And then we headed to the Rose Garden for the ceremony with President Obama. So that was surreal, as you can imagine. Just some pictures of before and after that. And there were a lot of tulips and not very many roses. So we all thought that was an interesting part of the Rose Garden. But it was a picture-perfect day with sunshine and beautiful weather. So we got to line up in the Roosevelt Room, and yeah, that was luck. My spot was like pure luck. They lined us up according to height, and kind of where you landed was where you stood, and I just happened to be right overlooking his shoulder through the whole ceremony. But we did, before the ceremony began, we did line up in the Roosevelt Room, so that was a great experience just to be in that room and have some dialogue with Arne Duncan. And then we got to step into the into the Oval Office individually to meet President Obama and take a picture with him, which I heard probably will get in like September, October, because that was the White House picture. But this is coming out of the Oval Office and then during the ceremony, which was very touching and poignant and inspiring. So President Obama is very funny. So there are a lot of great shots of him making us laugh and our response to that. He made reference to some of us looking like we were in junior high. I don't think it was directed towards me, but the footage looks like it, and maybe the picture does. Definitely some people that look even younger than me as teachers. But I love this shot. And then right up here up front is Shanna Peoples. She is our National Teacher of the Year from Texas. And she got to speak that day, and actually even after the ceremony ended, since it was such a beautiful day, President Obama said, let's go grab some coffee. So there is some incredible footage of them just kind of walking the streets of Washington and having coffee and stopping for bagels and stopping to talk to some school groups. So I just thought the whole day was outstanding. And when he came back to join us to take a picture, he mentioned how tall he was. I thought he was going to go up to the top. He just happened to stand right next to me. So that is his arm around my shoulder. I know everybody's like, is that President Obama's hand? Yes, it is. So that was a highlight as well. And then my absolute favorite picture of the entire trip, and probably my life, is this one right here. So just some great shots that the media was able to get and we were able to find. So
That is good.
we actually sang a song to him. So one of the teachers of the year is a music teacher from North Dakota, I think. And he wrote a song for us that we thought we'd sing at the closing ceremony maybe, and somebody happened to mention it to him while we were there. It could have been me, I don't know. I was just trying to take it all in. I have no idea what really happened. But he asked us to sing it, and we did, and it was a very fun experience. Also, the first time in history, the group of Stoys sang to the president. That same evening, we had a Sphinx Club Black Tie Gala, which was an extraordinary event with people from all different fields and practices who came together to celebrate teaching and to celebrate the National Teacher of the Year. So Arne Duncan spoke while we were there, and probably one of my new favorite people in the world, Lily Escalin Garcia, if I'm saying her name right, a dynamic speaker and person. So that was a big highlight for me as well. And getting to meet them was a great moment of the night too. And then on the left is Catherine Bassett, who's the president of the National Network of State Teachers of the Year. So they kind of continue the journey with us and create opportunities for us after our year ends. We worked at the U.S. Department of Education for one day, and we worked with the National Ambassador Teaching Fellows, like Emily Davis and Maddie Fennell. And then we got to break into smaller groups based on some areas of interest, and mine, of course, was teacher leadership and ways to expand on that. We finished up the week with a reception at the Microsoft Office of Innovation in DC. So they hosted our group And it was just a way to celebrate the events of the week and, have some last moments together. So this was just their technology that they had available that we were all able to write on. And that just represents really the family that we've become through this journey and, the relationships and connections that will last way beyond this year. After I returned, the very next day was the state conference for Delta Kappa Gamma, which is a women's sorority that celebrates educational leaders. So that was a fun experience to be able to speak about, what's happening in Michigan. I also had my daughter's communion party the day after that, so that was a pretty fun and intense week. But it was all great. And then last week I got to go to the Oakland County Executive Office to have a small group business forum with L. Brooks Patterson and some of the other members of this year's Elite 40 Under 40. So the idea behind it is to bring people from different professions together in Oakland County to be able to collaborate and join efforts in different areas. So Trieger on the left has an organization called Humble Design, which furnishes apartments and living areas for people who have just come out of homeless shelters. So I think that her organization is incredible. And then on the right is Jessica, who is a member of the school board in Birmingham and does work to help school districts become more financially sound. So it was really, really great to be able to speak with them and hear about what they're doing and what I can do to help them as well.
Guy doesn't look under 40.
But he is.
Yes. So that was my month. Thank you very much.
I meant Brooks. I'm
Quite a
sorry.
month.
Thank you, Melody. I followed Brooks Friday night, as Brian knows, speaking, and he had a few jokes there that I'd be afraid to tell. Okay, thank you, Melody, and we're going to move right on to the
Well, it's her, excuse
Yes,
me,
ma'am.
but it's her last report, so I think, is it? Or you
No,
have one more?
I do
Oh,
have
no,
one more big report in
Oh, okay.
June.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
So, John, we added,
Yeah.
let's get
Did
going on
the
that.
school turnaround policy, and let me give you us all a sense of, we need to adopt a policy to provide guidance for school turnaround. We're committed, board, superintendent, all of us, to see effective school turnarounds. It's very important, as committed as the governor is. That's why it was unfortunate that the governor moved the executive order taking the state school turnaround functionality out of the department and unnecessary, and when we were all and are eager to work together on an effective approach. However, the Constitution gives this board leadership and policy supervision over public education, and it also discusses the role of superintendent in implementing those policies. And nothing in the executive order specifically, in fact, it says in the executive order, nothing in this will diminish the authority under the Constitution of the state board to provide policy leadership over education, et cetera. So given all that, we do need to provide our best policy guidance on what effective school turnaround looks like and how we make it real. That will inform the state strategy wherever this turnaround functionality is. And as importantly, so that we can empower the current superintendent and the future superintendent to engage and work with the administration and DTNB and the governor's office on animating an effective, putting to work an effective school turnaround policy. And given the executive order goes into effect soon, if not today, we need to articulate our guidance in a little more specificity than the sort of general guidance that we've given before over making sure effective entities are managing school turnaround, et cetera, and making recommendations. And that's, given all that, talked to Mike and consulted with Mike on both the need to do this and what we would need to have it look like. Michelle, Cassandra, and I conspired on some expansion of notions of what school turnaround policy from our previous two paragraphs might look like. We looked at Massachusetts too, which has a very effective school turnaround functionality, which starts with how do we help the districts themselves get good at turning around failing schools, job one, long before going over to other entities taking over. In fact, they co-manage with the school district as a state. But mostly then we, in deference to the fact that Brian's coming in, wanted to empower him and support him in animating the kind of turnaround approach that he wants to help us animate, and knowing that he'd have to engage on our behalf with the work from July 1 on, really look to Brian for some recommendations on what the kind of steps, what kind of process, what kind of principles should be in a school turnaround approach that we would like to provide policy guidance to encourage and help make real in Michigan. So that's what this document is. It leans heavily on the kind of approach that Brian's bringing to the table. It does expand on our prior guidance, and I would just encourage you to look at the fact that it names some of the specific steps we think are important in school turnaround, from assessment and diagnosis to providing some support and help for the local districts to effectuate effective school turnaround, to, if necessary, moving to a stage where you monitor and have highly qualified entities that can help guide school turnaround, and only in the last resort move to take over under criteria that we help develop. But as importantly, I think, are the principles that are in the last section that we definitely want to communicate, need to guide school turnaround. This is all about improving student achievement and preparing them for success. Has to be based on particular understanding unique school needs. Needs to be phased. The goal is to help local districts succeed at turning around their own schools. That's the first priority. A lot of local input is important to design school turnaround. Transparency for all schools, similarly. And so I'm asking that we support this policy. Let's discuss it a bit. People are seeing things that are questions about, or they have serious issues about. Let's raise them. I don't think we have ability to wordsmith it too much, but I want to make sure that we are naming a policy that is guidance for effective school turnaround, that empowers our superintendent now and future to work with helping implement effective school turnaround with the turnaround functionality, again, wherever it may be, and working together to animate effective school turnaround, and provide our best thinking on the direction, the steps, and the principles that need to guide that process. Sandra, did you want to add more? Because you had a strong hand in some of the
I think you actually did a really good job of outlining why we were doing this. I just want to add, I do think it's important, given the fact that we've now had this change in the Reform District, not reporting it any longer to the Department of Ed, that it is important for the State Board of Education to weigh in with what our guidance is when it comes to school turnaround and any activities that might be related to that. I think that we probably should have taken this direction a long time ago, but now that we're under the circumstances we are, I think it's absolutely important that we do this, and we do it now.
Michelle?
Well, I agree 100%, and if I heard right today, the decisions around, like, within Detroit, and I assume other urban areas, that's going to be made between this manager and the Reform District. I did not hear mention of MDE or the board in there, or the local school board, or so I think, given our responsibilities under the Constitution, we can't, I think we need to make clear what our policies are.
Hi, it's Eileen. Is there a handout with this item? I'm watching and listening, so it's a little complicated, but I don't have anything in my agenda. I don't have a link to the agenda to this. Is this something new?
Check.
There is. It was sent around to all the board members on Friday.
I'll resend Friday. Okay, thanks.
They're going to resend it right now, Eileen.
Okay, thanks.
Again, the goal is to do our job, which is to provide our best policy guidance, but it's also to empower and support our superintendent, MDE, to engage constructively with the rest of the administration on school turnaround and to work together to animate effective school turnaround, and I think this will help us to do that.
Other perspectives, and Eileen will probably have one in a moment from, I only mean because she asked for the document.
I agree
Kathleen?
that we should be doing this. This is part of our role, I think. And I think we owe it to our constituents to do it. I had some questions with wording, but I don't know if it, it's not critical. I would do a little editing.
If you're willing to
But I don't
pull up
think,
anything unless you think it's a
if
major
you have
substantive issue.
apostrophes in the wrong place and stuff like that, it's hardly worth discussing. But,
Appreciate that, Kathleen.
It's okay, yeah.
High praise from President Emeritus Strauss.
Pam?
I appreciate you all putting this together, and I think that it was, it's a very well put together thoughts that I think that we hopefully can all appreciate. I don't remember where it is. There was just the, somewhere there's a step where the ISD or a local or a charter would assist a district. I can't remember which step
There's
that
step
is.
3, the top of page 2.
Is there any, do we envision how that choice is made? Or actually, it's listed as an example.
Right. I think our prior guidance on school turnaround, and we spent a lot of time discussing this, is we need some criteria, some mechanism that we shape, or the superintendent shapes, or for the thing we passed last summer, we even called in the legislature to formally set some criteria for who is well qualified to provide school turnaround services. Not all ISDs are good at it, not all charter management companies have good track records, could be good at it. So what I think this is saying is, let's ask our department to develop that process to frame those criteria for who could provide quality school turnaround, ISD, charter organization, or other educational entities. And that we're expecting that, those criteria and that process to be developed by our department, our superintendent. So there are some quality control criteria on who gets to do school turnaround or monitoring in this kind of formulation, which, again,
That's the
Brian
question that I
contributed.
had was what is quality and who defines it? And maybe we should be defining what we think is quality. We should have the criteria for quality. We should develop that.
And given Brian is not superintendent yet, we were a bit anxious about whether to engage him, though much of this good ideas are coming from him, but he agreed if there's some questions. Brian, in terms of the language here directing the Michigan Department of Education to develop the process, how were you envisioning that? Is that us looking to the superintendent to kind of frame those criteria in that process for who gets to be a monitor, so that you would be bringing that to us for our approval?
We should be the
Kathy?
monitor.
Go ahead.
Certainly, I'd want to work with the team to determine what we think it ought to be and then bring a proposal forward to the board.
I feel a responsibility to help Brian out a little bit here, because there are some things, I mean, we haven't, I'm not apologizing for this because we got it late. We had a lot of time just to get prepared for these other agreed-upon agenda items today, as you could see how intensive they were. I mean, but there are some contradictions in this in what we've already done school turnaround. And most of the school, I get the difference between takeover, by the way, and I get trying to establish a position on takeover. But what I'm getting at is the 27 that are off the list is because without the school reform office, but if you look at Linda's and the rest of the team here, so much of the work done on school turnaround is already established either in our policy or in law.
Can I speak to that? The difference is when it was under your purview, you report to the State Board of Education. So we had, on some level, some impact on that. Now that the reform district is completely outside of the department, we feel that we need an official policy. That's the difference here.
I get that. All I'm saying is what this is intersecting on is some of the things the department still has the authority on. Linda, maybe just, since you look like you're chomping at the bit, mention
I don't mean to.
an item or two as an example. It doesn't mean, the spirit behind this I get and makes sense. There'd be some things, we don't have a provision for taking over districts, so I don't know, I saw that in there. That would be difficult. There's not a fee provision. It doesn't mean there can't be a request for trying to have a fee provision. So some of that stuff, I think to Brian's comment a moment ago, as he said to me also on the side, is we've got to work some of that out with the staff when he's here. So my only caution would be, you can always amend stuff, by the way. You're trying to make appropriately some kind of spirit of a sense of spirit of a policy now that the EO has taken effect. I get that. And I think if there's a caveat that let Brian appropriately sort out with staff some of these issues, and maybe use an example if you have one, Linda.
I just think that all of the supports that are provided to the schools, once they are named in the priority school category or in the focus school category, are in OEII. And those supports are the kinds of things that address the district and the work that the district needs to do to provide infrastructure, and then the supports for the schools so that they are helping the teachers be able to deliver areas where the schools feel that they have problems. Some of the things that are outlined here are things that we are currently doing.
Right. So it may just be, the caveat might just be, what I just said, something along the lines, maybe it's a preamble to this, is that in the spirit of now that there's been an EO, to the degree these aren't already established within the department, the superintendent will consider or engage or whatever. Because there's a lot of detail in this in terms of distinguishing between what's already there. And if there happens to be a contradiction at some level, let's say there's a federal law issue in terms of what we do with turnaround schools, and this in some way, obviously with no malice, contradicts that, you're allowing through a caveat to say, this is the spirit of a policy, and some of the details still to be worked out over the ensuing months. Because I think John's right. It's good to make a statement as of today, and if you want to do it as policy or statement, I think is your prerogative.
I agree with you. I think we need to, and that's, again, this is not to be either or. If there's things we're doing already here that we also want to inform the practice of the school turnaround district office, that's part of the goal of this. If there's new things we want to bring to do in school turnaround to inform the shared work of the department and the school turnaround functionality now that we don't have it, that's good to do. I think maybe we could add a sentence that this empowers the current superintendent, whoever the superintendent is, to continue to work with work out consistency, inconsistencies, and make amendments for state board consideration to this policy to make it work.
That would be a good way to do that. And I think you, but I also wanted to just acknowledge another thing. If those of you who were able to make the all-staff, I purposely had the reform office stand up because I want to, no matter where the line goes, they can't succeed without the much larger team here and the team with the money. This is where title money comes. We're the state education agency. So the spirit behind it is this forces the continued working together of both groups, or it's not going to, there won't be any turnaround. I do get, to Cassandra's point, that now there's not the authority if it comes to actually naming schools for takeover, and I fully understand that. But so much of this other stuff, it wouldn't, the 27 that we announced a few weeks ago, that wouldn't have happened without serious work on school turnaround plans. So I was just listening when it said we should have maybe seen this a long time ago. We've been doing this for a number of...
I meant policy. I
Policy
didn't
wise.
mean what you guys were doing. I meant we should have put a policy in place.
Apply a policy in place.
Yeah.
I mean, most of this is following federal and state law that we actually engage in, and when we have, but that's to be, I get the spirit behind this. And I also know that, it's why I tried to say this in an earlier statement too, that virtually all of this, if not all of this, is going to be done on Brian's watch. That's why it's totally appropriate to be not waiting till July 1. I'm fine, more than fine with that, as I said to John on the phone.
Are there other points or discussion points people would like to make?
Yeah, I just want to apologize for completely missing this. I did read the memo, and then I just never opened the attachment, which is not like me. So, and maybe I was getting sick, because I'm definitely sick now. So I have a couple questions to ask. One is, there will be no new schools put on this board on this in this status now for how long? No new schools being added?
2017. Now, law, you know, when I heard Karen today, I learned some new things today too, not judging one way or the other, but when I heard, you know, a series of bills, who knows, it's probably, my guess is replacing 1280C, perhaps replacing 1280C, which we've been operating under for turnaround.
So then I would say that I recognize the hard work that went into creating this. I just feel totally ambushed because it didn't come through the legislative committee in any way, and it came on Friday, and we've had a policy of trying to have things out to board members for their examination in a much longer time frame than this. Certainly we have been nimble when there's been a crisis, but given that we have another month of Mike being on board and this isn't going to happen until 2017, it seems a bit rushed to be trying to do it now. I don't want to throw up any roadblocks, but I am curious as to how much of it we will have control over if the Office of School Reform is outside the facility, and whether or not all of that is worked through. I'm hearing as Mike talks that it may not be worked through, or that we may need to be identifying that it's a collaboration, and some of this stuff is a collaboration between the department and the other office. Is that the case?
I feel confident in meeting with Natasha and her team, and then symbolically, I guess I was trying to make a point at the all-staff and having them applauded for their work to make the point. It's kind of like our work with CEPI. CEPI doesn't report to the department. We work really well with CEPI. CEPI doesn't have, you know, we've got a lot of authority that CEPI doesn't have. They've got data. We, with the EOs that we were receivers of in terms of early childhood, we still work with DHS and DCH. So I'm confident. I'm confident in that working relationship, but I don't know, as you're inferring from this, what the decisions might be from an executive point of view ultimately on takeover and some of those things. I just assuming from what I heard from Karen today, though, that we may be seeing bills soon, very soon. You have a sense of this, Wendy, Ben, Marty? But it sounded like I thought I heard her say I's and T's, but maybe that was not correct. Maybe there's more substance to that. And that would give us a greater sense of what the spirit behind that is, because some of this, we're the state education agency. We fought this. I'll just say this. I personally fought this when the EAA, at the lunch discussion, it's one of the reasons I got into the point I made to some of you at lunch, was that I wanted to make sure it was clear to folks that the EAA could not be a state education agency. We were the state education agency. We received the funds, and we made the decisions related to those funds. That is a very important part of this whole piece that the board does have control over. But I do get certainly the point about the ultimate naming, perhaps, and what other points may be between now and then. I'm assuming that's going to be described in legislation, and I don't think it's inappropriate if you want to try to get out ahead of that with some thoughts about it. I don't know if it's policy, to Eileen's point, that's
Well,
up
again,
to you as a
going
board.
back to again, it's too bad, because it would be better to not have this sort of the challenges of working together on effective school turnaround with the full administration, us, and the department that are posed by an EO that relocates functionalities out of here. Given that's where it is now incumbent of us, per the Constitution and our job, to provide our best direction on what kind of school turnaround policy is likely to be most effective, and to empower you and Brian, who work for us, to help animate that policy as best they can.
I don't have trouble with this being forwarded as policy. I have trouble with it being effective. So I have trouble with its power to control events outside of us in the legislature, or with the entity that's been transferred. So whatever, let's see, how can I say this? If it's not going to be a strong collaborative document, In other words, if it's not going to be, if it's going to be a policy that basically says, gee, if we still have these things under our control, this is how we want to manage them, then that's one way of approaching it, and rushing that now would be important. I guess I view it as a best practices document that I wish could be worked through with other people as an agreement of some sort, and it doesn't sound as if that's the future of the document.
Well, again, just the history of this document, I think starting from when we met with the governor, Brian and I, we did talk specifically about, unfortunate you did the CEO, we all need to get and make happen effective school turnaround. We're committed to it. Brian Whiston, the governor's just meeting, is committed to it. Now, given where we are, what we need to do as a board is articulate our best guidance on what school turnaround looks like. We need to do that, given that you took that function away from us, with more detail, per what Cassandra said, with the functionality directly reporting to us through the superintendent. It's not as, we have you every week, every month to talk to about what are we doing on school turnaround. Now it's over here. But we have the opportunity to shape that guidance, and we began, I think the meeting that some of us were at, Michelle, the small group meeting of the board with Brian, we began to talk about, let's instead of us trying to write the policy, let's look to Brian's good ideas for school turnaround that he's bringing to the table, and let's try to operationalize the school turnaround approach that he is informing and recommending to us to take forward. And that took some time through last week to get this articulation in front of us, and then shared with all the board members with my request that it is timely and important that we do this, and trying to get it to you as soon as we could, and talking with Mike prior to that about the importance of this and how we were needing to develop it, making sure he got a look at it 4 days ago, and had flagged anything that was really problematic. And that brings us to today. And I do think, it would be helpful, obviously, Eileen. And so no intent to ambush anyone, trying to get it in front of us as fast as we can, but also now to be in advance of the EO taking effect, after which we have less to say about what school turnaround needs to look like and how to make it effective.
So I'm okay with passing it today. I just, as I said, I don't know whether it is going to end up being a document that we have that we say, boy, I wish it functioned that way, or whether it's really going to be a blueprint. And the other thing I would point out is that it'd be great if you're working on something of this import to let Cassandra know, so that the legislative committee is aware of it. And if you can send out, because obviously there are going to be timely issues that are happening now, not only with the transition, but with the pace of activities in Detroit, because that's somewhere along the way that will have to get resolved, and things are going to be moving fairly quickly. Sharing that with all of us so that we're all up to speed, as opposed to just a few people knowing about it, would be a healthy thing.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not directed at the legislature, so I'm not sure if it would be in the legislative committee.
Well, we're saying well, in the sense that it's a policy, I think it needs to be, but even to the whole board, I think that's important.
No, I understand. It should have been more, it would have been good to have more time. But I think.
No, it would have been good to have more notice.
Right, that's what I mean, more time for everyone to look at it.
No, not even look at it, just be aware that it's coming along.
Okay. So what?
Just a minute, I want to point that out, that if it's too fluid, certainly I've been involved with documents that if you sent out a copy on one day would be 50% wrong the following. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that in this transition, if some people end up at a meeting and others don't, and only those people know what's going on, it won't serve all of us as a collegial board in the long run.
Got it.
Thanks.
Okay. When does the EO take effect exactly?
Today.
12 hours ago.
Today. Okay, so I think that's why, for me,
It's
it's
in
a
effect.
reason to get a policy in clear as soon as possible and not wait another month. So, but I did have some questions about this, if I could. One is under step 3, where it talks about a quality target organization. I was wondering if, since authorizers are more involved or should be more involved with monitoring, that it be that. My concern is to have an organization that might have that is competing with a traditional and might want to convert traditionals to charters, to be involved in there's a financial incentive, in some way to have it fail and become a charter, have the competition fail. So that's my concern with using a charter organization to oversee these traditional schools when the traditional schools could be closed and replaced by a charter. It doesn't work the other way, where a charter will be replaced by a traditional school. So that's.
Could be,
Well,
certainly.
How? I mean, if you.
Have a crummy charter that gets closed and have the
kids go to
local
the
school
public
district or
school,
intermediate take it over. That
Yeah,
might be
but
very
by the
good.
four options that are given for the turnaround is, it's to close a school completely, have them go to another district, close the school and have it become a charter, close, it's one of the four things is not, if you are a charter, you will become, you know what I mean? So under the sort of the framework that we're working in for turnaround models, there's no option to have a charter become a traditional.
I didn't mean to sidetrack. I think
Yeah.
the point of this is we need our superintendent and under our guidance to establish some criteria on who's qualified to operate or monitor turnaround. And it could be a range of entities, and we don't have to even name any of them, from ISDs to perhaps a quality charter operator would be a good thing for a school versus a bad charter, I think we can figure that out later. I wouldn't want you to veto or
No,
because it names the word charter schools. It could be a good option. We need to look harder at who's a good entity to help with school turnaround with the recommendation of our superintendent.
Well, I think it would be helpful to just eliminate those examples. Just say, if you want to have a monitor, I'm not sure that's the greatest
Can we
idea.
say an educational entity to be signed as a monitor, period?
Monitor, period.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Oh, you could say a quality education. You want to support quality in there.
Well, I would like to just eliminate that.
To develop a
Did you-
quality monitor? Okay.
Just
say it
eliminate
monitor? Okay, thank you.
Other questions or recommendations? I have a recommendation for just a caveat, or I guess I would like to make a motion to approve this policy guidance with the addition that we would ask the superintendent to continue to identify issues around effective harmonization of school turnaround policy and effort, and recommend amendments to this policy as appropriate to the board.
Support.
Would you repeat that?
Probably can't, because I can't remember. The point is, that we would add a sentence saying, or pass it under the guidance that we're asking and empowering the superintendent to continuously identify issues around effective harmonization of school turnaround policy and effort, and recommend amendments to this policy to the board.
Okay.
That's a motion, and I believe Richard support. Thank you, Richard.
Okay, any further discussion?
About the amendment or about the whole thing?
The amendment.
Okay. Sorry. I do have a question what it means under step 2, where it speaks to additional authority to the superintendent. So the Michigan Department of Education will work with the school district to determine the reasons for lack of progress, and they grant additional authority to the superintendent and/or Board of Ed to address the reasons the goals are not being met. What is that referring to? I don't know what additional authority.
Feel free, Brian, don't.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you.
Again, I don't know what the law allows, but in general, if you're looking at a turnaround system, you're looking at problems that the superintendent isn't able to solve because he can't get agreement to solve it. does the state superintendent or MDE have a right to grant some additional authorities to him to solve that problem? And so there may be some conflicts there, but the general notion is, right now under turnaround, we love to give additional power and authority to an outside individual.
Right.
Let's give it to the experts, the superintendent and the board, to try to solve the problem first.
Did you talk about labor agreements, contracts? Is that what this is?
Well, I didn't have any of those issues.
Okay.
So that's not what I was thinking about, but I don't know what the issues would be. That's why we're asking them to, but Linda might have some ideas.
Frequently, it's about proper procurement systems, it's about securing enough teachers to be in enough classrooms to cover students. It's about financial issues. So frequently, those are the
Like
kinds of issues we encounter
cutting pay?
in districts that don't make progress.
And just a couple of things as this gets harmonized, I think that's a good word. I think part of it is there's clearly, and we're not going to be able to do it at this late in the day, but there's terminology issues because turnaround, I'm trying to say most of turnaround is here even after the EO. Takeover is not. So, I mean, they decide from 4 options on turnaround as a local district, and the one that's been most successful has been transformation. That's a federal law. So, I mean, they're doing that. But takeover.
This is based on that. It's very similar to what's going on already.
Well, in some ways, but that's where the harmony will have to, and honestly, I need to think about this, but I don't know, especially since it's not till 17, and I get what you're doing today, and I think that makes sense to try to get something out while this first day of the EO. On the other hand, I think it's important that since Brian's done a lot of thinking on this, he has the chance with the staff to think through. We'll do some preliminary to that while I'm still here, but ultimately that needs to be for Brian to bring back, I think, in harmony.
Get the barbecue.
And because he's, I said to him the other night, he was good to take this on. It's very difficult if you're not able to then just bunker down. He's already got a full-time job, bunker down for a few days with staff and say, okay, let's filter this out. But I would just say, to try to get ahead of this, some of it's the definition of terms. Turnaround is pretty much already here, largely under federal law and other things. And that's where the success of those 27 that have turned around on their own, and we pulled them off the list. And I thought it was important that we do so before the EO. Now, those schools aren't subject to the reform office, those 27. So that was done because they deserve it, and because it was within the timeline, but also to kind of set a tone that we and they together have turned those schools around already. So they're not subject to takeover at all. And then the takeover strategy is on to Brian's point about how much authority you can give to entities, let's say an ISD, make sure the ISD can have some of the same authorities that you might give to some third party, or maybe the district itself. Yes, sir.
Quick question. At that point that we just read here, additional authority to the superintendent. You're speaking of the local superintendent here?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Maybe we should
Michelle,
say
did you
that.
have anything else that's important?
Yeah.
Those are my two main, well, there's also concern about how long can a school be in priority, or whatever, at risk, or whatever the status is. Is there a time limit where they can, because right now it's like 3 years, is if you can maintain good performance over 3 years, and
I
that's
thought
clear to
I
me.
thought I
Is
read that in
Step
here
4,
somewhere.
Michelle, step 4,
Okay.
second sentence, we added for recommendation.
Oh, I got you.
Yep, there it
Okay,
is.
thank you.
And may I just, I didn't want to ignore your hand because you were waving like you were a middle school kid there for a minute. So I wanted to acknowledge your question, but I wanted to finish one thought on that. And that is that in addition to the harmony, there's pieces of this I think we can start on even before Brian, which then might allow for the legislative committee, because some of this, it can be in policy, but if it's in opposition to the law, it won't matter that it's in policy. I mean, for example, we don't have a vehicle to do fines. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to support a way to do the fines. And that might come out of a legislative committee saying, hey, to support this it's still kind of a proposed policy in one sense, or to be amended policy. Then you could say, hey, there's some legislative issues to support this that we're going to need to take on.
Don't you have the mechanism to withhold school aid?
Could you say that
Yeah,
again?
that's true.
I said, isn't there a mechanism in place now to allow to withhold school aid?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It certainly is invoked.
But not as fines.
Right, no, only as
Only the
specified
deficit
law already
plan.
in the school code, in the School Aid Act.
I mean, that's why this is more, it is complicated, because what's going to have to happen at some point is compare what's in the law, what may need to change to accommodate this, and then, again, in an ideal world, if we had time, we'd do that one first and then get to the policy, but I see, on the other hand, trying to get some statement that makes a point as of the day of the EO. But even that, the current one doesn't allow for fines. It as such. That's why I'm saying these are. I don't mean these aren't something that can be aspired to. And some of this is also trying to differentiate between deficit district issues that we have authority on versus turnaround issues. They're very different.
They're different.
Or they're fines in the law.
Eileen.
Yeah, Eileen.
The one thing I'm concerned about with this, and I understand why it needs to go out today. I understand why we couldn't comment on it before Friday. I get all that. But I do want to make sure that we aren't falling down and putting something together that people are going to look at later on and say, you know, they didn't even understand how the department worked. So one more time, I guess what I'm asking is, are there state laws that would come into conflict with what you've read in here, what you and the staff have read in here, Mike? And if so, can we wordsmith it and look at it out today? Is there anything in here that's going to not align with what?
I thought I just mentioned
Let
one.
me just say one more thing. I'm also very, very supportive of more reasonable policies and procedures of the department that were allowed by the feds. So I would love to have a magic wand and to waive it for a lot of the things that don't go right. I just don't know how good this is for alignment and whether that will impair its acceptance.
Why don't we just remove number 6 for now? I mean, it's not like it would take effect within the next 2 years anyway.
It's number 6.
Is the
Oh,
fines.
yeah. Remove that, but also, I'm just suggesting, Eileen, we can remove fines, because that's one, but given we just said explicitly, let's ask immediately our superintendent to begin to flag issues around that need fixing, and recommend fixes, acknowledging it's not all perfect.
Okay, so is there any way to put it out as a policy under advisement or something?
No.
Okay, all right. Well, and I'm not worried about the content. It's a logical document. I'm not worried about the content from our intent. I'm worried about its alignment with things that can be changed.
Since we got a few more things to do, I would ask for us to call the question. We have a motion and support, and any more discussion?
Sorry. I was going to suggest where it says additional authority to the superintendent or to address the reasons the call's not being met, provided that it conforms to state and federal labor law or law.
Could we just change the word there that says may grant additional authority to the superintendent to its superintendent? And that would refer to the school or district superintendent.
Yeah, I see.
Mhm.
That's clear.
So it's and conform, according to law.
Okay.
Does that work for you, Michelle?
Provided it conforms to, yeah.
Okay, you got this.
In conformance with state and federal law.
No, but I'll go back on the tape
That's
and
pretty,
get it.
pretty clear, okay.
Yeah, then
Good.
I'm all right. Then
All
I'm
right.
done, I promise. I promise.
Okay, there was any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same?
Thank you, and thank everybody for, obviously not the perfect process, but one that we needed to do, and appreciate everybody's constructive help.
Okay, now we're going to move to,
Superintendent, I have a question. This document, where does it go? Where does it go? To the department, where does it go?
Well, we could certainly, this is our policy guidance on school turnaround for things we control and for wherever school turnaround activities happen to live, work, and breathe. So certainly, it should be something that's communicated
Go to the
and carried
governor, with the
forward
governor's a
by our
member of the board, so
superintendent,
we get-
engaging with the school turnaround office and the functionalities of DTMB that have the responsibilities that were put in the EO.
So, okay, so this document goes to the state superintendent and the Michigan Department of Education, and then it's going to be implemented.
And the governor
And the governor.
And the director of
Oh,
the
okay.
reform
All
office,
right.
if I were to sue.
And then it goes on our website.
Yes.
Okay? Okey-doke. We're going to go to NASB and then the state and federal legislative update. So first, Lupe, I know you've worked on these awards. Thank you for your...
Okay, well, let me read what I have sent before. The State Board of Education members have received a communication from the National Association of State Board of Education, NASB, regarding nominations for the 2016 Board of Directors. This year, nominations are being solicited for President-elect, Secretary-Treasurer, and Area Director. Nominations are being accepted for awards in the categories of Policy of the Year, Friend of Education, and Distinguished Service Award. Nominations for David A. Casilco Award will also be accepted should members identify an individual who has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to NASB values and served state boards of education. State boards of education are encouraged to review and discuss nominations, which must be submitted to NASB by June the 8th, 2015. Okay, so the nominations, as we were notified, are open, and we will start by, and we can nominate as a board and also as a good standing NASB member of a state board. So there's two ways of nominating these candidates. However, I hope that we nominate them, as we've done in the past, as a board, the Michigan State Board of Education. So we have the Board of Directors positions, the President-elect, and you received a communication through Maryland from Eileen, and she nominated Richard Ziley for President-elect of NASB. Did you all receive that?
Can I second that nomination?
Okay, the nomination has been seconded. Okay, so all in favor of that nomination, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
So the motion
That's
passes.
The opposed
easy.
get to vote too.
You have to say the motion
Okay.
passed.
Lupe's taken over.
You should say you would accept.
Anybody opposed
happy to
to
leave
Richard
today, actually.
not being nominated
Works out
for that?
better.
And, okay, it passes because nobody said no. Okay, now, the next one, well, there are other offices, the area director and the secretary treasurer.
Well, Richard is already the area director.
Yeah, but
Your term is
you'll,
not up yet, isn't it a 2-year term? Yeah, so he's still a director.
we can still nominate somebody else.
Well, what if he doesn't become
Yeah, I know.
president?
We'll leave it as such, okay.
We don't want to kick him out of his spot.
No, we don't. Okay, now, for the other, according to the NASB bylaws, the following criteria must be met in order to be eligible for an office, so we already did him, so we're not going to go through that. Okay, now, the other awards, or the NASB Policy Leader of the Year Award 2015, and in the purpose of this award is an annual opportunity to recognize the contributions to education made by a national or state policymaker and education leaders. It underscores the vital role that creative, committed, and enduring leadership plays in improving and sustaining our education system. So if there's any nominations for that award? I didn't get any for that award.
No?
Nobody at the
Nobody.
table? Okay, and the other award is the NASB Friend of Education Award, and I have a nomination for that award, so I'll pass some paper I'm going to do that. Thank you. Okay, can you put the picture up for my nominee? I am proudly nominating Mayor George K. Hartwell from Grand Rapids, Michigan. And this award can be, well, let me read a little bit of who they want to. This award provides an annual opportunity to recognize citizens whose primary work may be outside of the realm of education policy and education systems, but whose contributions to education are significant and enduring. So, so this is somebody outside the educational field. And it could be an entertainer, it could be a politician, it could be a movie star, a basketball player, anybody outside of education.
That's Mayor Hartwell singing.
Yeah, that's his heart beating.
So-
That's his heart beating, it never stops. So you have here in front of you some of the things that he has created in his 10 years of service to Grand Rapids that deal just with students. If you go to Mayor's 50 campaign, that's what he proposed at one of his State of the City addresses. There he is at the last State of the City address, and he, at this State of the City address, he multiplied that Mayor's 50 to 100, and that's the Mayor's 100, and there are 100 companies that provide an opportunity to a student to work in a company. And so now there's not going to be 50 this summer, there's going to be 100 students working in different companies. So they get the experience, and they also get a stipend to work with that. I just attended the Kids Speak, something similar, I think, to what you presented, Superintendent Flanagan, concerning the advisory committee that you have a student. So this is Kids Speak, and they were from 4th grade on up to high school, and they all had something important that they would like their school or the policymakers to change, and they're writing to me now. I have some of the students emailing me, and they are going to come to one of our meetings. But it was very interesting that one of them talked about project-based learning, something like what was introduced today with active learning, and he's very adamant about changing the school to more project learning so they can individualize their learning. So there was they invited me to be in a panelist. So anyway, I'm not going to go through all of them because we'll be here all day, all night rather. We'll be here all day already. But these are some of the things that Mayor Hartwell has engaged himself. He's been very active in many other environment and energy and many different things. And we hate to see him go, but they passed a law now in Grand Rapids that we have term limits, and that's why he's going to go. But I'm sure that there's going to be great things for him to do, maybe perhaps in education. I know you've had him in your class.
He's fantastic. Mayor Hartwell's been a very effective leader on helping
very,
Grand
very
Rapids
much so.
represent on all these dimensions that are powerful and that young people care about, from education to better social services to cleaner, greener, better transportation to
the whole
downtown.
scope.
It's fantastic. He's a terrific person, too.
Yeah.
He's a minister. He comes out of a
Yeah.
faith background. How do you help people who need to participate in society participate? So.
Yes. Well, to tell you just a little bit more of this dynamic person, Mayor Hartwell's father founded the Hartwell Mortgage Company. When he passed away, Mayor Hartwell was supposed to take over as the CEO president, and he did. But he stayed for a very short time because he wanted to go to theology school, college, university. So he went and got his degree in divinity, and then he came back to Grand Rapids and administered to the homeless there on Hartside. Now it's called Hartside And so he ministered to the homeless. Then he ran for city commission to help the homeless. And so when we had the victory parties for him, the homeless were our special guest. And then, of course, he ran for mayor. It's made a big, tremendous difference. But a third of his time he spends with children with education. So I think he would be very fitting for that particular award.
Is that it? So you,
Yeah, I moved.
moved by Lupe,
I'll support that.
supported by Kathleen. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same? Great nomination. Excellent person.
Okay, and then the next award that we have is the NASB Distinguished Service Award 2015. Richard.
I would like to nominate Eileen Weiser for this. She has served for 2 terms here on Michigan's Board of Education. Many of you are perhaps better acquainted than I with her work, especially as serving as interpreting our concerns and recommendations to members of the state legislature and vice versa. I think that she has been outstanding and always calling our attention to how policies affect students, and not just the adults involved. And for these reasons, I think that she would be an outstanding, plus she maybe doesn't want me to mention this, but personally she has committed a lot to various charitable organizations. She and her husband have taken an important role in reviving the Detroit Science Center, among others. So I think for these reasons, she would be an outstanding nominee for Distinguished Service Award.
Is that a motion?
Support.
And supported by John.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Well, I was real pleased to have Eileen and, of course, the superintendent and Ben and Karen at our Cinco de Mayo celebration. And she traveled from Ann Arbor to introduce the superintendent. So there was a magnificent thing that I was real happy about and real proud of, that one of my colleagues on the board was able to come and be part of the celebration as we celebrated the work that Superintendent Flanagan has done. So I was real touched with that. But as I read how was I going to introduce Eileen, I went to her little, she doesn't have a whole bunch, but what she has is packed with a whole bunch of things that she has done. She's a renowned pianist, renowned organist. Maybe someday she can play for us. But there's a whole bunch of things that she has done to make a difference in the lives of children, in the lives of families, and in the lives of citizens all over the state. So I totally support her nomination.
That's great. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same? Congratulations, Eileen.
Thank you, I'm very honored. I'm glad I stayed on the phone and didn't croak.
Yeah, we are too.
I'm glad the cat didn't disconnect us.
Okay. So that's,
Okay, so I want to thank you for your time and your attention to this nominations. And I, as the NASB delegate, I promise that I will bring all the good information from the NASB Association, because they have a lot of wonderful things for us to learn from. Thank you.
thank you, Lupe. Marty, you're on.
Okay, in the interest of expediency, I will give a very abridged report here. The Legislative Committee met on May 4th, discussed several issues. From a legislative standpoint, down the street, budget-wise, both houses have passed their own budgets. They're sitting in the other House, Senate and House, waiting for action. It is expected that conference committees will begin possibly as early as next week. There is a revenue estimating conference this Friday where they will, set the revenue projection, from which point they will set targets. All this being said, The House version of the K-12 budget basically took a lot of the categoricals and rolled them into the foundation allowance. The Senate version adopted much of the governor's recommendation, including a $100 million increase in the at-risk funding. The legislative committee asked that a statement be developed to support that, at which point I will now pass it to Cassandra to discuss.
Do we have the statement?
Yep.
So the legislative committee talked about putting together a statement. There's actually two statements on here. We'll probably forgo the second one. But so the first statement that we looked at doing was regarding the at-risk funding and basically demonstrating our support for maintaining the at-risk funding in the school aid budget in year 2015-2016. The statement reads, education in Michigan has seen steady improvements over the past 9 years with increases in graduation rates, college entrance exam scores, and third grade reading proficiency, and a decline in the state's dropout rates. In our diligence to ensure that all kids are achieving, we must address the educational needs of those students who must overcome the impact of poverty. Child poverty in Michigan is up by 35% compared with 2006. 1 in every 4 children in Michigan lives in poverty. In the city of Detroit alone, 4 of every 5 children live in concentrated poverty. Poverty, by both in urban and rural communities, has repercussions on students, teachers, and schools. Food, housing, and safety insecurities have an overwhelming influence on children when they attend school and try to learn. Targeted additional resources are needed to help struggling students reach the academic success of the students in more favorable circumstances. Governor Snyder has proposed an additional $100 million in at-risk funding in the 2015-16 school aid budget. The State Board of Education fully supports that recommendation and urges the Michigan legislature to include that increased investment in its final budget. This funding reaches every corner of Michigan and will reflect the values of the state's leaders, that every child matters and our greatest challenges can be overcome.
Can I make a comment? I was really happy to see this statement come through, and I really appreciate the legislative committee and what I sense is broad support for this. You know, we talked ourselves about, and Michelle, you raised it today, sometimes spending money we have differentially or differently to help support better outcomes for all children is the more effective way to spend money, and I think this clearly says, yes, poor kids we need to support so that they have an equal chance at a great education, and it's a more effective way to spend money. It also came up when we met with the governor, and he said, I was kind of surprised my proposal didn't get more help from the education community about this is a better way to spend money if you care about learning gains and improving outcomes than alternate ways. So I think it's very important for us to say, this is the way to spend money that's going to be more effective to increase achievement, which is all we care about.
Yeah, I agree. I support, you made a motion?
I move that we support the statement regarding at-risk funding.
I second. And I'm agreeing with the governor on this, too.
For the record.
Beautifully written.
Any other further discussion? Any other further, I guess that's it. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same? Thank you, that's excellent.
The second statement, just so I can say, we had also talked about doing a statement regarding the governor's proposal regarding education in the city of Detroit, specifically around the idea that there needed to be a mechanism also for addressing not just school closure, but also school openings, considering there's an estimate of 20 to 30,000 additional seats in Detroit and students to fill them. And we thought this was an important part of an overall strategy. However, that was before we knew that we would have a presentation by Karen today, and we all had an opportunity to weigh in on that, and it was clear that she was taking notes and would take those comments back. So I'm suggesting that we hold off on a statement at this time, and we might consider at the next legislative committee or at a future legislative committee doing a more comprehensive statement.
I agree.
That's great. Thank you for taking that approach. I think that is a positive signal back to her work also. She's very good. I hope you can see that and going to really work at bridging all of this stuff. So consent agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
On the early warning bills and that are in, what is it, that liability and taxation?
Yeah, some are in the Senate Committee on Education, some are in local government.
Yeah, the one I'm concerned about were the ones that were in, if there's been any movement on those?
No.
No, okay, thank you.
Motion on consent agenda, please.
So move.
Moved by Lupe, supported by John. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Thank you. Any further comments from board members?
I
Yes.
did want to comment as part of the legislative report, though, that the NASB's Government Affairs Committee was on the phone yesterday, and they talked about the ESEA, that it's, I think you've all heard that there were 2 or 3 days of markup on with the committee, and Senator Alexander and Senator Murray want to have a couple of weeks, they're asking for a couple of weeks of floor debate. And Reg Lichty, the NASB Government Affairs person, said that they think that he'll be able to get at least a week in the next few weeks. And they're working in the House. Chairman Klein is working in the House to try to get, he's working individually, I guess, with the recalcitrant members who didn't want to support his bill, which was last year's bill. So he's working with them, so there might be a vote in the House again. But he was a little bit dubious about that, but he knows that this effort is being made, so.
Good.
So, yeah, it's interesting.
Thank you. Lupe?
Yes, well, I just want to show you 2 or 3 pictures of the Cinco de Mayo celebration that happened in Grand Rapids, Michigan, at the Grand Rapids Public Museum. And Superintendent Flanagan, together with Connie Dang and
Who was great.
and Chuy Morales, received the recognitions.
I was given a shirt.
We give guayaberas instead of a trophy and all those kind. We give traditional attire. So the men wear guayaberas, which is a very typical shirt for men. And of course, we're wearing some of the attire that women wear. And they were given this award because they live their lives following the values of Cesar Chavez and specifically working with children. And all of them working with children, with students in some way. So they were recognized as the 3 recipients. We had, can you change it?
Yep.
You saw the choir singing, and what happened, well, there's Eileen and Karen and Ben. Ben, can you see yourself? Okay. All right. And then the choir that was featured, there it is. Scotty in the back with the orange flowers was my student, and when he was my student, he and 2 other young men used to harmonize. I don't know anything about music. Maybe Eileen can coach me with some, give me some of her talent, but I don't know anything about music. But when they were with me, they would harmonize in corners in the building, and I heard them singing, and I asked them if they could be part of the assembly. They wanted to participate. I had assemblies and parties and all those kind of things for my students all the time. Those are the bonuses that I would give it. They loved it. So anyway, of course, they said yes. And I thought they were real good. I don't know if they were on key. I don't know anything about music, like I said. But what I did know was that they felt real good about themselves. And so I took them out in the community to sing in banquets and dinners. And the Secretary of State Education came to the city from Washington, D.C. I took them. So I would take them. And now Scotty and his family are in the musical world. He's a pastor of a church, and they sing beautiful, as you heard them singing the national anthem. They go many different places.
Very nice.
This young lady in the front not only was, I would happen to be sitting right there, not only a great singer, but she kind of dances while she's doing it. The others are.
So I invite all of you to our next event, October the 14th, is when our main focus is scholarships. So we're going to give a ton of scholarships. This was a big fundraiser for us, and we have a lot of sponsors. So October the 14th at the Everhart Center, now Grand Valley State University wants to host our event at 5:30 in the afternoon, and you're all welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I'd like to
Lupe.
say one other thing.
Yeah.
And I stand between a meeting in German, if I speak up, so I'm going to make it fast. It was a delightful event. The music was spectacular. The only thing that bothered me was that we were perilously close to the fossil exhibit.
Yes, we were.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say that I was able to go to the event at Wayne State University in which Michelle Obama was the featured speaker, and it was really exciting. There were almost 2,500 high school students who have been committed to go to college. And the whole thing was a acceptance day, or whatever they called it. It's the first time they have ever done this in Detroit. So it was exciting to see that many kids preparing to go to college. And they went from, anything from community college to University of Michigan. One at least was going to Harvard. One was going to Stanford. It was pretty impressive. And must have been 50 or 60 of them were introduced. And they introduced themselves and said what high school they're attending and what college they're planning to attend. And then they were the backdrop for the First Lady's presentation. And then at the end, of course, they all came around her, and she hugged every one of them. And then the kids just surged from the audience, and I couldn't see it all because they were all hiding her, but Dan Varner was there, standing next to me, and he said, she's hugging all of them. So they were very excited. But it was an exciting event to see that many kids from Detroit, where nobody succeeds in Detroit, but there were a couple of thousand kids who were succeeding.
So I also wanted to bring up an issue, if I could, just because it came to me, and it's around special education. And I think I communicated with Terry about it. I think that was who, Johnson. But I've been getting information about cases where parents who are trying to get special ed services may have been given compensatory or special, gone through the due process in one, and then the district in turn sues the parents either for a frivolous lawsuit or challenges and appeals into the court system even after. So there's been some discussion and from different people who are really concerned about this and trying to look at ways to address this either legislatively or within the department. So I just wanted to let you know that I've been having conversations around that, and that there's, for parents who've been through, they get hit with the lawsuits anyway, it seems crazy to me, but there's a number of cases ongoing right now.
Thank you. I know Terry's. Yes, ma'am.
To finish, I would like to, before we adjourn, is to thank you again for the coin. Is it a coin? But the motto, State of Michigan, symbol of teamwork.
And today's a good example. I mean,
Yes.
these were some tough issues. And
Teamwork.
a really good example of thoughtful consideration of things and working together and not always agreeing. That's okay. So, and yeah, I'm at over 400 meetings, board meetings, as a superintendent of one kind or another, and I've got one left, so I'm getting ready for it.
Wow.
Good. 400. No wonder I'm tired.